Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and before we get started on tonight's story, I want to remind you about Chilling, the Scary Stories app that I'm a narrator on, which very soon will become Chilling 2.0, a full-fledged platform which will include video content in addition to these stories. Full-length horror movies, series, and exclusive Chilling originals are just some of what Chilling 2.0 is bringing to horror fans. It's being crafted by horror fans for horror fans. So download now and start your free trial to see if you like it. There are so many popular narrators on Chilling, and over 1,000 stories with hours more being added every week. Lastly, Chilling is now accepting investments from the public, and investors are taking notice. You can get in on it now before the shares are projected to increase in value greatly. Don't miss out. Chilling is a must-have app for horror story lovers, and Chilling 2.0 will change the game completely. The links to download and check out the investment page are in the description. And now, on to tonight's story.
You know you're in for a treat when you can already see the props peeling off the walls before you get in. Rick tried to push the foam sword back on the wall, only for it to flop back down the moment he let go. I snickered and elbowed him. "Leave it alone, it's gonna make it worse," I said. "It looks so sad, though." Rick nudged it before he huffed and crossed his arms. "Oh, this is so stupid." "Shut up, it's either this or we're stuck watching Nightmare Before Christmas on repeat with my little sister," I said. Susan blinked owlishly. "But I like Nightmare Before Christmas," she said. We all bust out laughing at that as the line slowly trudged forward. This was the only haunted house within driving distance of our houses, and it left a lot to be desired. But ever since we were freshmen, we'd pay the ridiculously high fee of $7 a person to go on through anyway. When the death house is your only option on Halloween, you're taking that option. Be it a shitty scare, better a shitty scare than no scare at all. The five of us walked up to the bored-looking girl in a cheap vampire costume standing at the front. "$5 for the house," I said, pushing forward our tickets. The girl looked up and popped her bubblegum. "Rule change. Only 4 at a time," she said. "Oh, you gotta be kidding me!" We all groaned, and Rick threw up his arms. "Come on! It's just one more person! We've always gone together," he complained. The girl shrugged. "Not my problem. One of you can go with the next group." God, I hate people who can't bend a rule. And I could already hear the muttering of the annoyed person behind us. Fine. Who wants to wait?" I said. I was already looking at Rick. He was the oldest other than me, and he could learn a lesson about patience. A soft voice cleared her throat. Rachel smiled and waved her hand. "I'll wait a few more minutes. It's okay. I'll just walk extra fast to keep up." I must have looked flabbergasted. "Rachel, you cried last year when the clown jumped at you. What's with the sudden change?" I asked. I was already feeling hesitant. Rachel was the youngest of us, and faint-hearted when it came to fear. "I didn't cry," she pouted before sighing. "Really, I'm fine. Go, she shooed us on. I chewed my bottom lip before I shrugged. "All right. Well, hurry up and try to catch up, and remember, the actors are not allowed to touch you, and if they do, feel free to clock them." Rachel laughed, and after our tickets were handed in, the rest of us walked in. I caught a glimpse of Rachel talking with the vampire chick, who seemed to have the reaction anyone had around Rachel. Melt, because of cute. Even tonight, she was dressed as a princess, with a bright pink dress and a crooked rhinestone tiara. The rest of us had gone as horror icons. I was Freddy Krueger, Susan was Carrie, Rick was Jason Voorhees, and Grant was Jeff the Killer. I nearly kicked his ass because he had lied and said that he was going to be Leatherface, not some crappy Creepypasta character. Most of us had ditched our masks and left them in the car. I, for one, wasn't going to wear that sticky rubber nightmare all night. Rick was the only one who kept his, and it was hanging off his belt at the moment. Not Rachel, though. She wanted to be cute, and nothing could talk her out of that. I bust out laughing as a cannibal leaped out from the cheap fake vines and moss, howling and grasping at our faces. "Hey man, brush your teeth," I said, laughing again when the cannibal flipped me off. "Oh, you're so rude," Susan tuttered her tongue. "It's not my fault they all suck. You can literally see the guy's chainsaw poking out of the cage up ahead. It's not exactly a jump scare when you know it's coming. It's not the actor's fault, really. The death house has been set up poorly year after year, and whoever they dragged into acting had to make do with crappy props, cramped spaces, and horrible makeup. It didn't mean that I didn't get a good laugh out of scaring them, though. I dragged my fake claws along a prison wall, snickering quietly as I heard the mad prisoner up ahead drop his chainsaw and yelp. "You sleep tight tonight," I cackled, and waving menacingly at the now flustered actor. He looked like he had spilled ketchup all over his fake beard and tacky orange jumpsuit. How are these guys still in business? Nightmare Before Christmas is sounding better and better by the second, Rick said, fake lunging at more of the mad prisoners and watching them flinch. Susan nodded. And my blood's getting itchy, she complained, scratching her face. Well, we'll wash it off when we get out. I instinctively looked back, expecting to see a bright pink dress at any moment. Oh, Jesus, where the hell's Rachel? She might not go in, Grant said quietly enough that we had to strain our ears to hear him. I should have stayed back with her. She's probably frozen in fear. She's not a baby anymore, Susan said, nearly tripping over plastic chains. She'll be fine. Race you to the Black Lagoon with the zombie hillbillies! She took off running, hoisting her dress past her knees to avoid falling on her face. No fair, you got a head start, Rick whined, nearly dropping his hockey mask on the ground as he scrambled to catch up. I rolled my eyes and looked at Grant. Should we wait a bit longer and see if Rachel catches up? I asked. Grant thought for a second, biting his lip. Nah, we're not supposed to stop anyway. Rachel's probably buddied up with a group behind us. The ones that look like famous dead people as zombies. Yeah. Was one of them undead David Bowie? Because that's not cool. We took off after Rick and Susan, laughing at the terrible light effects and poor setup. One of the actors saw Susan and Rick bolting toward him, and he ended up running away at the sight of Carrie and Jason coming at him full speed. The end didn't come fast enough, but a smile was on my face the whole time. I mean, sure, it was a crappy haunted house, but it was our haunted house, you know? I swore as I tripped over a mannequin meant to look like a corpse, nearly landing on my face. Jesus! Wait up, Rick! I said as I scrambled back to my feet. A hand wrapped around my ankle and I nearly lost it. I slowly turned my head around. The corpse grinned maniacally back. We're dead. We didn't make it out. I screamed and nearly kicked the guy in the face, getting to my feet. Hey, no fair! Yeah, you're not supposed to touch the people going through the house, I complained. You nearly kicked me in the ribs, dude. That was fair. The guy flopped back down and resumed being dead. I limped the rest of the hallway down, not even reacting when another actor wearing a tattered yellow and red cape waved at me. Happy Halloween! Would you like a treat? He said. Pass, I grumbled, as I pushed open the exit door and walked out to meet with my friends. Yeah, thanks for leaving me behind. I nearly got eaten by a zombie, Grant snickered. The guy on the floor? I mean, he actually got me. I nearly lost myself. He said. Susan shivered as she giggled. I'm so cold. Let's go back to the fairground so we can chill by a bonfire and have some hot cider, she said. I held up my hand. Wait, what about Rachel? Did she leave yet? We all looked around, Grant standing on tippy toes to catch a glimpse of that princess dress. Nothing, he said, lowering back down. She's probably still inside. Or she never went in at all, Rick sighed. Wait here. I'll check up by the entrance. Here, have my jacket. Rick pulled off his coat and draped it over Susan's shoulders. Be back in a second. He took off running. I plopped down on the ground and caught my breath. Oh, Jesus Christ. For once I actually got caught in the death house, I mumbled. He got me and Rick too. I think Rick nearly cried, Susan said, setting a hand on my shoulder. Grant nodded. Yeah, for once, we got a good actor. He's at the very end. He should go pro. I saw Rick jogging back. Hey, Rick, did Rachel head back for Coco? I asked, getting to my feet. Rick came to a stop, and I saw how unsettled he was. Rachel actually went in by herself 3 minutes after us. Vampire chick said that she seemed pretty confident. You don't think she fainted, did you? He asked. I looked back at the door, my stomach twisting. Hey, I'm going to go back in, I said, walking up to the door. You know, if you get caught going back this way, you're going to get us all tossed out of the carnival, Susan said, trying to grab my arm. I shook her off. And if Rachel fainted, she might have hit her head, or she's having a panic attack and couldn't move because some stupid actor actually grabbed her, I said. I reached for the doorknob. The door slammed open and nearly hit me across the face. There stood Rachel, a little paler, and her eyes were a little red with tears. She was there. Then she grinned and held up a round, bright red lollipop. Trick or treat! Did you guys get the candy from the guy in the cape? She asked. What? No, I told him to buzz off. Wait, what, was he seriously giving out candy? Oh man, I missed that. I groaned and my shoulders sagged. How much candy did you get? Rachel unwrapped her treat and popped it in her mouth. Just. But he had a whole bag full, all homemade, and a huge variety. Chocolates, suckers, jawbreakers. You seriously didn't get any? Susan looked sheepish. Thought he was joking. Oh man, that looks yum. Susan pulled the lollipop free of her lips. It is. Oh man, this is way better than the dum-dums you get at the bank. She put it back in her mouth. Come on, I want to get a hot drink and sit by the fire. She ran on ahead, grinning from ear to ear. My heart had finally slowed down and I shook my head. I could never read that girl, I said. Grant shrugged. Guess she really did grow up from last year. Come on. Last one there buys hot cocoa. He ran off after Rachel. I shook my head and gave chase. My paycheck was still a few days out. I was borderline broke already. Susan was the last one to the fire pit. She was now carrying her heels. My feet hurt. Rachel giggled hysterically. The candy had now smeared her lips scarlet. Yeah, maybe next year don't wear a costume with heels. She hiked up her skirt and showed off her dirty tennis shoes. I'm comfy and I still look like a princess. Mostly, I said, reaching up and readjusting her crown. But that's gonna fall off if you're not careful, and you're absolutely going to choke if you run around with a sucker in your mouth. Rachel shook her head. Nah, it's almost mostly gone, see? She pulled out of her mouth, a trail of crimson saliva connecting her lips to the stick for a second before the spit strand flopped back down on her chin. Sure enough, the candy had already mostly dissolved, leaving only a small, misshapen orb left. I took the stick to get a better look. I thought they're supposed to last longer than this. Like he said, they were homemade. Maybe they taste better, but don't last as long. And give me that back. Rachel snatched it back and licked it a few times. So tasty, she whined, before she wiped her mouth off. I want another one, but I don't have the money to go back to the death house again. Yeah, neither do I. I just have money for maybe 2 cups of cocoa, I said. Rachel stood on tiptoes and kissed me on the cheek. Then buy me a cup, pretty please, she said, her eyes wide and pleading. I sputtered for a few moments. Grant's jaw dropped, and I heard Susan quietly squeal behind me. Sure. Susan, you lost the race. Come with me for a second? My voice sounded more like a 12-year-old going through puberty at the moment, but I didn't care. I speed-walked away from my friends as casually as I could. Did that just happen? I said, trying to keep my voice quiet. Susan grinned. Oh, it totally did. Oh my gosh, finally, I've been waiting for you two to get together forever, she said, practically dancing with every step she took. Oh my God, Susan, I groaned and dragged my hand down my face. I don't even know if I like her like that. She's still in high school. We graduated last year. She's graduating this year, you weirdo? Susan smacked my back as she skipped up to the booth. Okay, 2 ciders, 1 cocoa, and this guy has to get a cocoa for himself and his girlfriend. I groaned. Please don't call Rachel my... A loud scream cut me off. And not one from the death house either, although you never heard screams from there in the first place. This one came from the fire pit behind us. I spun around and saw Rick lying on the ground. For a second, I thought that Rachel was shaking him, trying to get him to wake up, while Grant was trying to get closer. Then I realized that Grant was trying to pull Rachel off of him. As she gnawed on Rick's throat. Hey, get off him! Rachel, help! Somebody help! Grant managed to lift Rachel off of him. The girl hissed and spit like a wild animal. She threw her weight backwards. Grant fell back into the open flames. He howled as he rolled away, his white hoodie catching like a match. For a second, Rachel looked back up at me, blood dripping down her mouth and her chest. She cocked her head to the side before she sped off, running for the nearby woods. Susan screamed. She ran to Rick's side and ripped off the jacket he'd given her to wear, pressing it against his neck. Grant was putting himself out. I could hear him moaning in pain. I ran after Rachel and into the woods. I tripped over brambles and ripped open my jeans and the thorns, and nearly fell on my face twice as I looked for glimpses of my friend. I caught sight of a bright pink dress on occasion, but it blinked out of existence the moment I saw it. I came to a stop, my lungs burning as I attempted to take a breath. I wheezed before I looked up. Where's Rachel? Where the hell is... I was now eye to eye with the actor wearing the yellow and red cape. I couldn't scream. He bent down. He looked me in the face. Was he this tall when I saw him in the death house? His skin wasn't pale from the makeup, although I thought that was the only way that you could look that white without being dead. He grinned literally ear to ear, revealing a mouth full of yellowed and broken fangs. He slowly reached into his cape and pulled out a sack, opening it up for me to look inside. It's candy. So much candy. All in homemade packaging, tied with ribbons, each piece looking far more delectable than anything else you'd get on Halloween night.
Do you want a treat, David?
I reached into the bag and plucked out another lollipop. This one was dark green with a solid core that may have been chocolate or some sort of gummy. I swallowed it before I put it back. No, I don't want a treat. Where's Rachel? I backed up, unable to look at this freak's face any longer. Here. I looked behind me to see Rachel. She'd shed her pink dress and was only wearing a white slip now. She still had the costume crown on her head. She smiled, a handful of teeth falling out of her mouth, and you wouldn't see a space amongst all her new sharpened ones protruding from her gums. Go home, David. Please, she said. I shook my head. No, I can't leave Rachel. I can't leave Rachel. Not now. Not like this. Not with this thing. She shook my hand and gently squeezed it. Fingernails had been exchanged with claws. They sliced through the meat of my palm like butter. Please, David. Go home, she said. An odd sadness in her eyes that didn't match her macabre grin. And crying. I did. I ran all the way home. I didn't even go back to the festival, even though I could hear screams behind me. The festival was going to hell, but I didn't care. I went home. The neighborhood's quiet. I can see police cars slowly patrolling the streets. No trick-or-treating this year. Someone already came by the house and told my family not to take candy from anyone we didn't know, especially if this candy was homemade or in any torn wrappers. How many people took candy from that man in the yellow and red cape tonight?
There was something ominous about the first email waiting in my inbox this morning. Yuri Bogdanov, a name I hadn't heard since college. I remember a blonde, muscular guy with thick black glasses who wore shorts in the winter, loved football, studied English literature, but nothing in those blurry memories would explain why Yuri was writing me now. 4 years later, in the midst of a war, no less. I felt a pang of guilt for not contacting him when the conflict began. He'd clearly followed my career enough to know my work email, as the small zine where I worked, the Unexplained Quarterly. We get a daily barrage of emails about hauntings, cryptid sightings, UFO abductions, possessions, and other bizarre events. 99% of our leads are trash, but the other 1% are, well, unexplained. And that's where I come in. I investigate, clarify for the reader, build on the information we receive. But Yuri's email was blank. There was no information. Just an attachment with a Cyrillic name. My cursor hovered over the delete button. But what if it was a virus? I'd catch hell if I let anything onto our work system. And in the end, curiosity got the better of me. I shut my eyes, and I clicked. It seemed to be a scan of some sort of transcript, a military transcript. When I ran it through a translator and read through the results were choppy, but by the time I finished reading, I understood why Yuri contacted me again, after all these years. To avoid incriminating or exposing anyone, I've changed the names, and I won't specify the location except to say that the events that are transcribed here took place in rural southeastern Ukraine in mid-February of 2022. State your name and rank for the record. Lev Simlovich. Soroshilov. Sergeant. Voroshilov? Like the old general. No relation, I suppose? They tell us you're behind the line boys are savages. Fanatics. Tell us you won't talk, not even under torture, is that right? Don't fuck with me. They picked me up from the army because I flunked out of engineering school, and I'm not related to any general. Well, let's get the facts then. What were you and your comrades doing behind our lines? And how many of you are there? My group. 10. But there's probably others. I suppose you'll find out soon enough. They call it irregular warfare. What it really means is torching supplies, getting off bombs in civilian areas, blaming it on the enemy. Instead of military targets, our groups target the soft side. Supplies, morale, disinformation. Soft targets. Like you. Cooperative, aren't you? Makes me wonder if you're lying. Interrogator's note. Subject's visibly disturbed, trembling, eyes darting around the room, signs of mania in his speech patterns. Something's obviously got to him. I told you don't fuck with me. My side will arrange an accident for me if they even think I talk to you. Then they'll tell my grandmother I died a hero. The moment I opened my mouth, I was good as dead. But I'd rather be killed by them than it. All right. Let's start with the events that led up to your capture, shall we? You were taken in an abandoned cabin, where 6 of your comrades were also found dead. Ah! Interrogator's note. The subject begins to scream until his throat was too hoarse to continue. The screams then turned to giggles. And then to laughter. All right. So what's the joke? Joke is everything. Everything in this fucking miserable world is the joke. But look, I'll tell you how my part in it begins. As I said, there were 10 of us. We were surprised by a patrol after setting fire to a grain depot. Sergei got popped right away. See the stain on my uniform? Just below the shoulder? That's what's left of him. He was going to get married this fall. You already know about the depot fire. What happened next? Tristain, Michael, covered our retreat through the woods. They took on a whole patrol of you people with only 3 trucks to protect them, just so that we could escape. I don't know where Michael was shot, but he screamed a lot. And Rustin, I was going to ask if you knew what happened to him, but he's dead. It's written all over your face. Rustin is dead. Can't confirm or deny that. Were you aware that you were retreating deeper into our territory? Aware? Was I aware of my heart galloping like a goddamn racehorse? I was aware. I was aware of the pine trees whipping my face and the way my boots sank into the mud. The only thing I was aware of was that I was running for my life. The cabin where you were found, 13 kilometers from the grain depot. You ran very far. Indeed. Didn't feel like it. Time acts funny when you're under fire. You're older than me, but you've never been to the front, have you? I can see it in your eyes. Let's get back on track. What happened after you reached the cabin? It's like something out of a dream. Like the place had been abandoned back when there was a czar. That wooden roof covered in pine needles. Those foot-thick, whitewashed walls. Wasn't even a path to get there. It was just waiting for us. In the middle of the woods. Didn't it occur to you that anyone looking for you would search the structure? Command told us our gear would be thick enough to survive outdoors in the winter. They lied. Even if we slept in the woods, we would have been found by chattering of our teeth. Kicked in the door, cleared the place. There was nothing. Some sagging old furniture, rats' nests in the corners, soot in the chimney. The temperature was dropping, so it was better than the forest. We barred the doors, we got as comfortable as we could, nobody talked much. We were exhausted. Keyed up on adrenaline. All at the same time. I'd never felt anything like that before. I hope I never do again. Alright. Let's jump ahead to when Michael came back, right? That's why we're really here, isn't it? That's why you idiots wasting time and resources on nobodies like me. Around what time? Midnight. Just after midnight. Interrogator's notes. Till now, the subjects avoided talking about this critical moment. The subject's unfocused eyes, change of tone, and slackened facial muscles suggest that he's disassociating himself from a memory, one that he's unable to process. It was dark. We could barely see our own white breath in the moonlight. We heard something pawing at the door. Ice cracked on the knob when it turned. We readied our rifles. The old wooden door squealed open. Subjects become unresponsive. When touched, he began to scream. Guards removed him to his cell to await tomorrow's interrogation. So, here we are again. And the one we left off, please. Please, just shoot me. Don't make me remember. When I close my eyes, I can still see it. See his muddy combat boots coming through the doorway. Whose muddy combat boots? Michael's! Michael's, you bastard! Do I have to spell everything out for you? Michael. The one who was shot? Had he recovered from his wounds? We couldn't tell. It was too dark. All we could see was his uniform, the profile of his face. It was Michael, all right. I know it sounds crazy, but we started laughing our heads off, laughing in pure relief that he was alive, and that we hadn't been trapped by one of your patrols. Pretty soon we were touching his clothes like he was Christ come back to life. But something was wrong. Just his silence or the odd way he moved. Michael, no little clouds of white breath came out of his mouth and his skin. His skin was cold, so very cold. Did anyone attempt to give Michael medical attention? Bogdan, our medic, he tried. Then everything went to hell. Michael grabbed Bogdan's throat, and we heard this snapping sound, like a toothpick breaking in half. Then drool was dribbling out of Bogdan's lips. His eyes are like marbles. There's no life to them. So without saying a word, Michael attacked your squad. How did they react? We couldn't process it. We'd been through so much together, seeing Michael break Bogdan's neck in front of our eyes. It would have been like your own mother casually walking up to your little sister and cutting her heart. No one wanted to shoot Michael. Thought it might be PTSD or pain or anything except for what it was. Bogdan, he was a big guy. If it wasn't for the war, he never would have been allowed to serve. But Michael lifted him up like a stuffed doll then. He used Bogdan's corpse to block the door. By that point, guns were out. We were screaming at Michael to put his hands up, to get down on the ground. In the end, we started shooting. Didn't make any difference. Did Michael have some kind of special armor, or didn't make any difference because Michael was already dead? Our bullets had no impact. The whole grisly scene was lit only by gunfire, like a disco from hell. The noise was deafening. It was like he was everywhere at once. In the muzzle flash, we could see him. Half of Michael's head was missing, but somehow he was smiling. I don't know who ran first, but the rest of us followed. We were tripping over furniture, we were breaking glass, we were slamming into walls. It was total chaos. He took our weapons as easily as an adult taking away some misbehaving children's toy. When the ear-splitting racket finally stopped, at the pitch blackness returned. We knew it was over. We were backed into a corner of the cabin's kitchen like a herd of sheep cornered by a wolf. A wolf that didn't need to breathe. Someone, Foyder, I think, was trying to run, and there was this wet sound like meat being thrown on a slab. We felt him thrown back with the rest of us. Ivan, where are you, Ivan? You killed 7 people, Ivan! Cold hands reached past my shoulders, grabbing Ivan Rachmaninoff. He started screaming. The rest of us did too. It was pitch black. Couldn't see what was happening, but we could hear it. We could smell it. We feel the wet splatter like paint that hit our faces. Ivan Rachmaninoff was found with 7 wounds of undetermined cause. Undetermined cause? Michael tore out 7 fistfuls of him. Ripped out his fucking intestines. Then he came for the rest of us. One by one, he called us in the dark like we were kids playing hide and seek. Alexei, you killed 5. 5 lights have gone out in the world because of you, Alexei. Now it's your turn. Was it true, what Michael said? What do you think? Not like we counted the people we shot, but yes, I think so. You found 2 others with 3 chunks gone, right? Hearts, livers, spines. Another missing both eyes, and a 4th. Just missing his head. Took 1 piece of each of us for every life we took. So why are you here? I fired my gun like everyone else. I'm not a traitor. But you didn't kill anyone, did you? I always fire over their heads. A little to the left or right. Maybe I did it unconsciously. Who knows? It was different in training. With a target in front of me as a crack shot. When the target's lighting a cigarette, stretching, chatting with his friends, I couldn't. Interrogator's note. The subject buried his face in his hands and wept silently for several minutes. It was pitch black in the kitchen of that abandoned cabin. The air smelled like frost and ashes and the entrails of my friends. A rich, rotten smell like cooking liver and onions. I knew that they were dead because I couldn't hear them gasping or screaming. Whatever Michael had become, he didn't breathe, but he was there. His hands were cold and bloody as refrigerated meat. He passed them over my hands, my neck, my face, like he was feeling for something. You haven't taken a single life. What to do with you? You can go and tell them I'm coming. Tell them my name is War. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding you. You claim that you are part of a guerrilla force operating behind our lines. When surprised by a patrol, you took refuge in the cabin where you were found along with those mutilated corpses. You claim they were killed by a dead man. I claim? I'm telling the truth, you goddamn idiot. You don't get it. You don't get it at all. He's still out there, Michael. Or the thing that he's become. Still out there. He's War. He isn't going to stop. You shot one of the patrol that brought you in. His name was Danilo Nikiforov. He was 22 years old. And he died of his wound. Did you know that? I didn't mean to, I swear. I thought Michael was back. I thought he was coming to finish me off. I thought... This concludes my interview with Sergeant Lev Simonovich. Simonovich will be moved to a holding facility and observed for further mental issues. Interrogator's note. Lev Simonovich was found dead 2 months after his disposition. He was found in the prison yard after a heavy snowfall. One of his eyes had been torn from his skull. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and before we get started on tonight's story, I'm going to let you know about a new book available now from tonight's author, The Family, written by Dale Drake. Some of you may be familiar with Nicholas Raddick, but you haven't heard his entire story, and it's available now on Kindle and paperback on Amazon. Take a look in the description down below. And now, on to tonight's story. Okay, David Bennett said, putting on his sunniest smile. Hit it, Nige. Nige gave him a 3-finger countdown, and then pressed the record button. Hey, boys and ghouls, Bennett winked into the camera. Here we are, live in the beautiful coastal village of Mavagesi on another adventure, and boy, do we have a great show for you over the coming days. Right here, in this idyllic village, lays a dark secret, a house of murder and madness, known as the Van Draven House. Over the next few days, we here at Ghost Seekers will investigate and infiltrate this infamous house to see what horrors dwell inside. Join us over the next few days, right here on this channel. And remember, darkness dwells within. Cut, Nigel said. We got it, first take and all. Thank God it's not summer. Jenny grinned from where she had sat out of view on a small wooden bench, watching the murky seawater lap at the harbor's concrete sides, a steaming hot chocolate to ward off the growing winter breeze. I heard this place is packed with visitors for most of the year round. Yeah, well, David replied as Nigel packed up the equipment. Looks like the locals get a break every winter. How about we get a drink? Nigel said, eyeing up a nearby pub. I could upload this to YouTube, we could finally get warm. Sounds good, Jenny said, dumping what was left of her hot chocolate in a nearby bin. They have a nice crackling fire by the window. I saw it as we passed. Okay, sounds good, David said, leading the way. Maybe we can get a reaction from some of the locals. I hear they're real touchy about the place. Phones at the ready, he grinned. The pub was called The Lantern, and did indeed have a real open fire, as well as low-hanging beams, soft leather sofas, and a generally welcoming attitude, which surprised David. He was half expecting it to be like that scene from An American Werewolf in London. You know the one, where the two guys walk in and enter the pub, and it goes silent, and the locals all stop and stare. But apart from a few quick glances as they took a seat by the fire, nobody paid them any mind. So, what are we having? David said, reaching for his wallet. Pint of lager for me. Make that too, Jenny said, stripping off her many layers. All right then, David said, crossing the room and leaning heavily on the bar. The barkeep came round, his shirt sleeves rolled up over his muscular forearms. What can I get you? He said in a heavy West Country accent. David ordered and paid, but lingered for a while, sipping his drink, and then dove right in. Excuse me, he said to the big man, who was now polishing glasses with a half-clean dish towel. The man smiled and came back across. Is there anything else? Just a little information, perhaps. Oh, the big man said with a raised eyebrow. What do you want to know? The house, David said, watching the man's face closely. The one on the hill, facing the sea. The man's eyes narrowed. I don't know of any house. David laughed at that. Not any house. Funny that you live in a village full of them, but let's see if I can refresh your memory. House is called the Van Draven House. Me and my friends are investigators. We look into the paranormal and such. My YouTube channel has close to 1 million subs, he said proudly. This story, it's gonna push us right over the threshold. You ain't thinking of going up there, are you? The man said, taking a step backward, his face draining of color, and David was shocked to see a drastic transformation in the man. As a matter of fact, we are. The man muttered something to himself and stalked away, and was soon replaced by a smiling barmaid. What the hell? David said, gathering up his drinks and sitting back down by the fire. You took your time, Nigel said, drinking heavily from his pint. Man could die of thirst. A woman, too, Jenny said, sipping at her pint more gingerly. Just trying to gather a little information. You perhaps see how the locals react to our plans. And? Nigel questioned. Well, if the reaction to the barkeep's anything to go by, better keep a low profile. Huh. That bad? Jenny asked, looking concerned. Just then, the door swung open and a tall man strolled in, rubbing his hands together briskly and heading over to the bar. Seeing the man, the barkeep reappeared and poured him a shot of something, which he drank gratefully. They talked for a minute or two, and the tall man came across to where the group was sitting and plonked himself down at their table. Smiling, he took another sip of his drink and waited. David coughed nervously. Can we help you with something? The man sighed and rubbed at his bearded chin that was just starting to show the first flecks of gray, before reaching into his jacket pocket and placing his warrant card face up on the table. The name's Brian Lansbury, Constable Lansbury to you. Nigel scooped up the warrant card and checked the man's ID. Jenny looked over his shoulder before he gently put it back down. "So what can I do for you, Constable?" David said. "We haven't been here long enough to break any laws." "Not yet, you haven't. But if you go into that old house, you'll be doing, and I have no problem charging you with the trespass." "Now wait a goddamn minute," Jenny said, but David held up a restraining hand, keeping his voice level. "From what I know of the house, it's been derelict for some time and has no owner, so how can you accuse us of trespassing?" "I'll tell you how, because that old place reverted back to the parish council some years ago, and they say that anybody goes into the Van Draven place is trespassing. Now, is that clear enough for you? Besides, what do you kids really want to do up there? You have any idea what's gone on in that house over the years? Do you know how it all started?" "Lucas Van Draven," David interrupted smoothly, who retired to Mavagassi after his many years in business as a merchant seaman. 2 men died in the building of the house. Later, Lucas himself went insane, killed his wife, Elizabeth, her maid, Matilda, and his manservant, Stevens. There was talk of foul practices, worship to some unclean gods or spirits. Some years later, another man moved in, shipbuilder. His name slips my mind, but not his cause of death. He was found hanging in what was once Lucas Van Draven's study. After that, the house lay empty for some time until the Jonas family moved in and then promptly went missing without a trace. Oh, all their belongings were found, but as for the family itself, gone. Never to be heard from again. Then, in 72, almost 60 years later, another family, the Dorchesters, found in the basement, their bodies torn, twisted, as if by some terrible force. Or, so the story says. And, most recently, the Malones in 2010. 1 man, 1 woman, 2 little girls. It said the father was found in the basement, his family stabbed to pieces and strewn all about him. They later found your predecessor, one Andrew Clutterbuck, who was sent to investigate, hanging from the rafters in an upstairs sewing room. And then there was the 2 village drunks who tried to break into Lucas Van Draven's tomb. 1 missing. Other, now a raving lunatic. Should I go on? He smirked at the constable. "I wish you wouldn't," the other man replied, looking a little green. "And so you know your history. History of the house. Still, you want to go up there?" "I do. I intend to record every minute of it, put it online." "You see, Constable, I don't believe it. Not a single word of it. Spirits, ghosts, don't exist. But they bring in views. Those idiots on the internet just soak that shit up. Do you know how many so-called haunted houses I've been in? Actually slept in. Me and my crew. I've been pulling this shit off for nearly 5 years. The biggest horror I've seen was a used condom being fought over by 2 rats. There's no ghosts, Constable. Just rumors. Superstitious nonsense presided over by small-minded villagers. Fact is, you can't stop me from going up there. And even if you stop me now, I'll just come back some night a week from now, maybe a month, hell, maybe a year. But I'll get in. Small-minded villagers, huh? The constable said, throwing back his drink before standing and straightening his trousers. "You're right, of course. Can't stop you from going up there. I'm only 1 man. I don't intend on getting anywhere near that godforsaken place. Neither will anyone else from the village. But take my advice," he said, eyeing all 3 of them. "Give this one a miss. If you value your lives, perhaps even your souls, give this one a hard pass." "Or what?" Nigel piped in. "You'll arrest us when we come out?" Constable turned and started heading out the door. "Come out?" He laughed over his shoulder. "Who says you're coming out?" With that portent of doom hanging between them, he exited the scene. "Did you get all that?" David said, turning to Jenny. "Sure," she grinned, taking her cell phone from out of her jacket pocket. "Audio only, but I got it." "Great," he grinned back at her. "Nigel, start uploading." Late in the afternoon, they sorted their gear and drove up to Beach Road. where the Van Draven house was located. Nigel carried the recording equipment and lights while Jenny and David got lumbered with the camping gear. "Look at that," Jenny said as they walked down the abandoned street. "Just like on Google Maps. Every one of those houses is empty. You know how much a house in Cornwall with views like that goes for?" she said, nodding towards the sea. "I mean, the entire road's on a cliff. Look at the views. It goes on for miles. You can almost see the curvature of the earth." "Not a flat earther, huh?" David grinned. "Guy killed his wife on this road," David piped in. "Skinned her alive, stitched her skin to a dressmaker's dummy. Guess that and the old house pretty much cleared people out of here. And sure is spooky, though. All those empty houses," he said, walking past yet another dilapidated for sale sign. "Constable stories got you quaking in your boots," David laughed. "Not me," Nigel replied somewhat waspishly. "But I don't see the reason we have to stay the night. Goddamn spiders and mice and the shutters." "Don't worry, Nige," Jenny said, throwing a stiff elbow into his ribs. "I'll protect you." "Well," David said, coming to a sudden stop, "here it is. Van Draven house." The house itself was set a little ways back from the rest of the house, a kind of mini mansion set in its own grounds, with rearing stone walls now falling into despair and covered with clinging ivy. The main gate was black iron, rusting hinges starting to sag. The house itself was in the same poor condition, its roof sagging, its stone walls starting to crumble. The many windows looked out at them with a kind of greedy indifference, and David began to feel almost smothered in its shadow. "For a place that's supposed to be off limits, sure as hell ain't done much about it," Jenny said, looking around. "No chains on the gate, no boarded up windows, not even a no trespassing sign. Not anywhere." "Remember what the constable said," Nigel replied, "about nobody from the village ever coming up here? Guess they don't even have the stones to board up the place." "It's like some kind of mass hypnosis, or hysteria," David said, turning to the other two. "Hell, we could be doing the village a favor by spending the night here and proving, once and for all, it's only an old house, nothing to be afraid of." Sure, Jenny said, squeezing between the rusting gates. "Bet they'll throw us a parade and everything." "That would be great," David grinned, following after her. "Maybe even get our faces on the cover of the Cornish Times or whatever shit splat these yokels read." "If they can read," Nigel said, passing through the equipment before joining the other two in the leaf-strewn courtyard. "Look at these," David said, crossing over to the tall wooden doors and bending down. "Those lions?" Jenny asked, squatting down beside him. "Yeah, I mean, look. There's the crest of the Van Dravens. See a clipper ship riding the crest of a wave, and above it, this great eagle carrying a struggling fish." "Talk about delusions of grandeur," Nigel said, looking up at the sky. "We better get inside, set up before it gets full dark." They set up in a large dining room. The part of the house had been renovated by one of the more recent owners. The floors were smooth, hard wood, the walls replastered. Even these fresher works were now starting to show signs of decay. The rest of the house, however, was like something straight out of a Hammer House horror flick. All peeling plasters, sagging timbers, even with the windows mostly intact, the house was cold, perhaps colder than it should be. The air stank of rot, age, and bad dreams. Once they were seated, they took a tour around the house. David did his bit, explaining the history of the house for the viewers, while Nigel followed with the camera, Jenny behind him fussing about the lighting. It was an old routine for them. First, they told the spooky story, the sun setting ominously through the windows. Then they would catch a few hours' sleep and do a live stream in the wee hours of the morning, exiting the house with the coming dawn. It was all very symbolic, and the viewers ate it all up. After they were finished, they went back to the dining room, ate a few snacks, and drank tea from a flask. Nigel smoked one of his many cigarettes while David and Jenny complained and pretended to choke. "All that hype," David said, climbing into his sleeping bag. "Not a thing. Not even a ghostly moan, a rattling of chains." "You sound so disappointed," Jenny said, doing the same. David ignored her and nodded over to Nigel, who was already sound asleep. I guess the mice won't be bothering him any. Haven't seen so much as a single spider. But David said nothing, his breathing already starting to become heavy and deep. Nigel awoke to a sound. He wasn't sure what it was, but it was enough to wake him. The room was now almost pitch black, only lit by a full moon that sailed outside their window. Or maybe it wasn't the noise. Maybe it was the ache coming from his full bladder. Tea always made him want to piss, but hey, he was an Englishman. What choice did he really have? With a sigh, he unzipped his sleeping bag, switched off his headlamp, and checked his watch. It was a little after 2 a.m. The others would be up in about an hour, so he moved slowly and quietly, not wanting to disturb them. He was in the hallway now, near the ornate staircase, heading for the front door to relieve himself, when he heard a child's giggle from above him. He stopped in mid-stride, his blood freezing in his veins as he turned, his eyes bugging, his mouth hanging open. There was a little girl on the stairs. She was dressed in 80s attire. Shh, she whispered to him. Sissy says we have to be real quiet. Daddy did something bad to Mommy, and Sissy says we have to hide, just like hide and seek. Suddenly a knife exploded from her chest, blood flowing from her mouth, cascading down her chest, and she turned and grinned at him through bloodied teeth. Guess he found us. He'll find you too. A disembodied hand shot out of the darkness, grabbed a fistful of her hair, and dragged her screaming back into the shadows. Nigel turned and ran, his bladder letting go, a scream locked behind his chest. He burst back through the dining room door, falling to his knees, trying hard to breathe. David and Jenny were beside him. He felt a sharp pain and his vision swam back into focus. Sorry, Jenny said. I thought you were going to faint. What the hell happened? Jesus Christ. It's true. It's all fucking true. I saw her. Saw who? David asked. A girl, Nigel snapped. A little girl on the stairs. Fuck this, he said, gathering up his equipment. I'm getting the hell out of here. Wait a goddamn minute, David said, grabbing his arm. You're telling me you actually saw something in here? Didn't I just say so? Nigel said, shaking free. A girl on the staircase. Somebody stabbed her. Wait, okay, just wait. Wait. David sighed, grabbing up a flashlight and running out of the room. Don't! Nigel called after him. But he was already gone, Jenny hot on his heels. Hold on, David, she called as they entered the hallway. He was on the stairs, flashing his torch all around, but there was nothing. Just years and years of dust and deathly silence. Think he was playing some kind of trick? David said, heading back down. You think a trick made him piss his pants? Jenny whispered back. Sleepwalking? Maybe a bad dream. David continued. Hey, Nige, listen, man, he said, entering the room. But there he stopped. Nigel wasn't there anymore. All his equipment was, even his headlamp still rolling around on the floor as if discarded in a hurry. What the hell? Where did he go? He didn't come past us, Jenny said, licking her lips nervously. Perhaps he hightailed it through the back door. Without his camera? You know how much he loves that thing? I mean, okay, fine. I reckon that asshole, he's probably just playing one of his stupid tricks again. What? Jenny said. Without his flashlight. Something is going on, David. Maybe he's having a nervous breakdown or something. Hell, he could still be asleep. He barely said 2 words to us. I've heard of people holding entire conversations while sleepwalking. Some people even drive their car. Okay. So, now what? David said. What now? Now we find him and we get the hell out of this place. This feels all wrong to me. It's like the place suddenly woke up or something. Okay, look, don't get all freaked out on me, David said. Let's go find him. Grabbing up his flashlight and shrugging into Nigel's discarded jacket, he went into the hall, Jenny hot on his heels. You take the kitchen, okay? I'll take the study and the library. Meet me back here in 5 minutes, okay? What, are you out of your mind? You know what happens in all those horror movies when people split up? Jenny said, clawing at his arm. This isn't a horror story on a stupid YouTube channel, Jenny. David snapped. The quicker we find him, the quicker we can get out of here, okay? Now, go look. That said, he stomped off, shouting Nigel's name. Asshole, Jenny muttered, heading towards the back of the house. Nigel, she whispered, her breath steaming the night air, her hand picking up a slight tremble. She was in a large pantry now that led into the kitchen. Her flashlight picked up a rusty-looking sink, fat droplets of muck-colored water plinking into its chipped, sagging surface. A huge chopping block sat in the middle of the room, gauged and splintered, and tall, rusting shelves with bulging canned goods formed disorienting shadows on her torch. Suddenly, the door behind her slammed shut. She screamed and spun around, hammering on the door, calling David's name. Elizabeth, a voice floated out of the darkness. Is that you, my love? Jenny turned around slowly, as if in a dream. There was a woman, mostly obscured by darkness. Only her face was clearly visible. She was beautiful, her skin the color of sweet caramel, her voice musical with a hint of the island. Where have you been, my darling? She beckoned towards Jenny with one smooth, rounded arm. Come to me, my love. Let us embrace as we did before. Jenny actually found herself taking a small step forward. The woman was so beautiful, her voice enchanting. Realizing what she was doing, she shook herself and pushed her hard back against the door. The woman frowned and stepped more fully into the light. That's when Jenny began to scream. David spun about. For a moment he thought he heard something, but it sounded far away, as if coming from some long-distant tunnel. Jesus Christ, Nigel, where the fuck are you? He said, shining his flashlight over the dusty study, illuminating many torn and tattered books. His flashlight passed over an old ornate desk, but then suddenly flickered back. There was a man sitting there, his clothes ancient and tattered. Lucas, David gasped, all the air leaving his body, his bowels feeling hot and heavy as he began to shake uncontrollably. You have to burn it, the apparition beseeched. We're trapped here. It feeds off us. So many of us now. Burn it, the apparition's eyes widened. You must go. It's coming. Suddenly, Lucas Van Draven screamed. His body broke out in weeping sores as he began to rot. He was crawling over the desk now, grinning through blackened teeth. Yes, I feed, it leered, and I will have you, just like I have your friends. You will know an eternity of torment, locked behind these walls. It was reaching for him now, its skeletal fingers scraping across his jacket, breaking his paralysis. He fled from the room, with great clumsy strides bursting into the hallway where Nigel and Jenny awaited him. We have to leave, now, he screamed at them, trying to look everywhere at once. When they didn't move, he trained the flashlight more fully upon them. Nigel grinned at him through the shattered remains of his face. Still don't believe in ghosts, David. Why don't you stay a while? There's so much more to see. That's right, Jenny giggled from beside him, her head dangling at an obscene angle. It's so beautifully dark here, David. We can be together forever. Suddenly, she snarled and lunged for him. He turned to run, but got tangled in his own feet. With a cry, he fell backwards, right out of the front door, and scrambled away as a multitude of grasping hands grabbed at his feet desperately, trying to drag him back inside. Turning, he fled, sure that he was being pursued by some unknown terror, as he lunged through the gate and into the street. He didn't look back, but leapt into the van, slamming the door and locking it tight behind him. Only then did he look. But there was nothing. Only an old house, dilapidated and falling into ruin. He grabbed the key and started up the engine, but then stopped. You have to burn it, a voice whispered through the recess of his mind. For the love of God, burn it down. His fear was being replaced now by a smoldering rage. Fucking house, he snarled. God-cursed fucking house. Trying hard not to think, he got out of the van. He went to the back, He grabbed up the spare jerry cans of gas. "Okay, motherfucker. Here we go," he growled. Pushing back through the gate, he approached the house, being careful not to get too close. He sloshed the gas through the still open doorway, leaving a trail backwards towards his feet. Thankfully, he was still wearing Nigel's jacket and came up with a Zippo lighter emblazoned with a soaring eagle on its side. "Okay, you son of a bitch," he grinned, flicking open the lighter. "Time to die." That said, he threw the burning flame onto the ground, igniting the gas that roared towards the house. But just as it was about to hit the doorway, it stopped. Defying the laws of physics, the flame suddenly turned and raced back towards him. With a cry, David turned to flee, but it was already too late. The fallen gas can at his side exploded, consuming him in a shower of searing flames. He began to dance and scream as his hair caught fire, and his skin began to melt. The last thing that David Bennett ever saw was the Van Draven house looming above him. The windows filled with smiling faces as they watched him burn. Inside the house, all was quiet. Spiders spun their webs. Mice ran through the decaying walls. A grandfather clock ticked softly. And the house waited and waited and waited. Outside, the crest of Van Draven blazed like a beacon of madness in the soft moonlight. There it was again. Tiny raised fist, the giggle, single newborn digit pointing at the wall behind me. The bare, empty wall. When the doctor told my girlfriend Kate that our baby was precocious, I had to look the word up in the dictionary, but there's no doubt about it. John was advanced for his age. He was imitating our hand gestures, speaking gibberish months before the nurses, the parenting books, or even the internet said that he should be able to. We took it as a good sign. As a young couple who had never intended to be parents, we needed all the good signs we could get. John's every cry, movement, or rash sent us diving into a bottomless pit of questions. Ones that all boiled down to basically the same thing. Is our baby normal? Is he going to be okay? And compared to the struggles some new parents face, waving at the wall should have been nothing. A non-issue. And it would have been. It would have been if it weren't for the strange events that always happened just before or after John waved. Mishaps, Katie called them, but I preferred impossibilities. How else should I describe a lamp that flings itself across a room, only to shatter against the wall? A Christmas tree that spontaneously catches fire? A shower head that suddenly bursts apart, nearly decapitating our 10-month-old baby? I was afraid that by the time I was able to prove that the bizarre events surrounding our son were more than just coincidences, it would be too late for John. The stranger things got, the harder it became to share what I was going through with Katie. I feared what she would think of my sanity if I told her the letters in my alphabet soup had arranged themselves into the words, "dead child." Or if I explained how sometimes when I was driving out in the country with John and I fiddled with the radio, I'd hear a distant voice inside the static screaming, "Kill the baby, kill the baby, kill the baby," over and over. The first time it happened, I was so horrified that I didn't notice when John waved at something in the trees. If I'd been a millisecond slower stomping on the brake, a stag that was charging madly out of the trees would have killed us both. During the rare moments when in bed together that John's erratic sleep schedule allowed us, I'd lay awake listening to Katie's deep, peaceful snores and wondering if she too had experienced inexplicable things she was afraid to share with me. One thing was clear. It couldn't last. The secrets and constant tension filled our house like a toxic cloud, threatening to destroy our relationship and even jeopardize our ability to care for John. My girlfriend knew that I was trying, talking to psychiatrists, pediatricians, even priests. What Katie didn't know, however, was that I was also considering the services of a psychic. Oddly enough, it was the priest who put me in touch with her. "You must understand," Father Keene explained, "that we churchmen are all like any other specialized profession. Just as a plumber specializes in pipes, or a carpenter in woodwork, We specialize in bringing souls closer to God. He hesitated then, rubbing the stubble on his jaw like he was having second thoughts about what he was about to tell me. However, there are other professionals with other specializations. I heard the dry swallow in his throat while he scribbled a phone number on the back of a business card and handed it to me. Elsie Knott, medium, channeler, exorcist, walk-ins only. The only psychics that I'd ever heard of were late-night TV figures with jangly fake jewelry who promised their gullible supporters everything from lottery winnings to a cure for erectile dysfunction. I knew Katie wouldn't approve, but I was at the end of my rope. In fact, in our drive back from my meeting with the priest, John had started pointing and gibbering excitedly at something outside the car, something that only he could see. I gripped the wheel with white knuckles, felt a familiar sense of doom tighten my chest. It's like I could barely breathe. What was about to happen? I only heard a pop when our right front tire burst, sending us careening to the next lane. Only quick thinking from a semi-truck driver saved us both from a gruesome death. It had to stop. As soon as I attached the spare, I plugged the address from the psychic's office into my GPS. 40 minutes later, we were still driving through the pine trees. Elsie Knott's home office turned out to be a trailer in a forest at the end of a gravel road. Christmas lights and charms swung cheerfully from its redwood deck, and an enormous garden grew around the remnants of a rusted-out VW bug. A dead ring of what I assumed was salted earth circled the property. John giggled and waved at something the moment we got out of the car. My blood ran cold. There was only a few white chickens who'd come clucking over to greet us. I listened to the drone of the cicadas and wondered what the hell I was doing here. Are you going to stand out there staring all day, or come up and say hi? Elsie leaned on the screen door, with a tiny fist on her hip. Her short stature, fiery red pixie cut, and floral print dress gave her the look of an angry red-headed Tinkerbell. Face to face with the exorcist, it was clear that she was still a teenager. Elsie Knott was barely as tall as my shoulder, a sickly crimson stain over her apron. I got strawberry jam cooking, so we gotta be snappy about this. Inside Elsie's trailer, all the lamps had tassels. Portraits of Jesus, Elvis, and Johnny Cash lined the walls. A cat clock ticked away the time above the dusty TV, showing reruns of Magnum P.I., and the only deliverance from the sweltering summer heat came from a fly-taped box fan, wheezing away beneath the polyester curtains. This is my grandma's place, she explained. Keeping it this way makes me feel closer to her. She was the longest-lived one of us I'd ever heard of. Made it to 99. They got her while she was gathering mushrooms in the woods out back. Crucifix slipped off of her neck. Elsie swept a pile of magazines off the coffee table, grabbed John out of my surprised hands, and began to flip him around like a slab of bacon. She looked in his eyes, ears, nose, and throat. Off came his onesie and his diaper. Kid's got a rash, hang on. Elsie came back from the kitchen with a cloth and a jar of something that smelled like a spoiled cider. Apple cider vinegar and aloe vera, twice a day. She buttoned my giggling son back up inside his onesie and handed him back to me. That's it? I gaped. What about the way he sees stuff that ain't there? Ellie plopped herself on the huge recliner across from me and crossed her bare feet. Ain't nothing you can do about that. Kid's one of us. Try to protect him like my grandma did for me. You don't seem as smart as grandma, though. Kid probably won't make it past 5, but hey, you can try, right? Protect him from what? Look, the roof needs fixing and I got jam on the stove. You want any more of my time? You gotta have to pay for it. She brought a bright red nail to her lips. 20 ought to do it. Elsie stuffed the crumpled bill that I handed her into her apron, and I followed her to the kitchen, where she carried on with her canning while she talked. For just about all of human history, we've had mediums, channelers, shamans, people affected by things that nobody else can see. Nowadays, there ain't hardly any of us. Now, why do you think that is? Modern science, I began. It's because they killed us all, that's why. Elise's fist went back to her hips. Look, there are things out there that don't want to be seen or even heard of. They recognize us for what we are and they kill us off ASAP. Just like they're trying to do to your son. They're smart, though. Don't want to draw too much attention. That's why they always try to make it look like an accident, unless they get really desperate. John started whimpering. He was getting hungry and needed to get back. I began. Thank you for your time, miss. Don't you want to know how to protect your kid? Elsie demanded. She stormed over to an immense bookshelf that I hadn't noticed and pulled a yellowish scrap of paper. Look, you follow these steps, it'll stop. When it does, though, she jammed a tiny finger into my chest. You owe me $80. What if I don't pay? I joked. Oh, I don't know. Elsie gave me a wry smile. Maybe I'll put a curse on you. All I'm asking is that we try, I pleaded with Katie later that night. The circle of salt I poured around the house had aroused her suspicions. Now she'd caught me nailing an iron horseshoe above the door to John's room. I still had 11 steps to go. Katie snatched the paper from my hand. I can't believe you paid for this garbage. You do realize we had to put that tire on credit, right? We need formula and diapers, not this mumbo-jumbo. Katie must have seen the crestfallen look in my eyes. Her voice softened. But I guess none of this stuff is exactly harmful to babies. You know what? Go for it. 7 days later, I owed Elsie $80. Do we really have to keep all this up? Katie waved the list at me over breakfast, her mouth full of pancakes, on top of everything else we have to do. It's working, isn't it? I replied. John hasn't waved or pointed or babbled at an empty room in almost 2 weeks now. There hasn't been a single freak accident. It's just so much to remember, Katie groaned. And it's so weird. My girlfriend wasn't wrong. As a non-Christian, I wasn't exactly comfortable with both of us wearing crosses all the time, and the house smelled like garlic. It had been really hard to find a silver-bladed pocket knife. The homemade pancakes I cooked up to celebrate our miraculous disaster-free week made breakfast take longer than usual, and Katie was running late for work. Maybe that's why she'd forgotten her necklace on the dresser. It wasn't a simple thing, just 2 pieces of iron held together in a cross shape by a bit of silver wire. But it was one of the more important things on Elsie Knott's list. A sense of foreboding seemed to follow me as I drove John back out to Elsie Knott's trailer to pay my dues and learn more about how to protect my son. Work, did it? Elsie was on her hands and knees, weeding her garden in a gigantic straw sun hat that made her look even scrawnier than she was. Told ya. Once again, she stuffed my cash into the pocket of her apron. What's next? There's something I didn't tell you last time. Half because it's not that important until the kid starts going out in the public more often, and half because I didn't want to freak out too much. Elsie wiped her hands off on her apron and took a deep breath. These things, the ones that come from people like John and Grandma and me, they can get inside people who aren't protected. They could use them to hurt your kid. I got another list for you here. She handed me a paper from her apron. You see anybody showing any of the signs around little John here? Kick him to the curb and run, you got it? Elsie tickled John a little, wriggling her nose to make him laugh, then handing him back to me with a meaningful stare. I hope I'll be seeing y'all a lot more as time goes on. That'd mean you're both still alive. There was something sad about Elsie's goodbye wave as we drove out over the protective ring of salt. Katie was leaning against the mailbox when we got home. I wondered if she locked herself out of the house. There's my precious boy, she smiled, and ran towards the passenger side window with her arms outstretched. I put the car in park and stepped out as she tugged on the car door handle with increasing ferocity. Honey, I ventured, it's locked. My girlfriend snapped her head towards me, her face twisted in an expression of indescribable hatred. Unlock it then, she snarled. I want to hold my precious baby. There was that word again. Precious. Katie hardly ever used it. I hadn't read all the instruction on Elsie's most recent scrap of paper, but I remembered seeing something about sudden changes in personality being a warning sign. I looked around. Our quiet suburban street was desolate beneath the blazing afternoon sun. It was just me, Katie, and John, who was locked in a hot car. Open the door, honey, Katie insisted. I moved slowly back around to the driver's side. I tried to keep eye contact with Katie while I fumbled with my keys, trying to slip it into the lock without arousing too much suspicion, but Katie's eyes narrowed like a hungry crocodile's. Strange eye color, movement, or shape. Something else from Elsie's list. "Open the door, honey," Katie insisted. "Okay," I agreed, then slipped inside the car and turned on the ignition. My girlfriend let out an unholy scream and jabbed the butcher's knife she'd been hiding behind her back at our brand new tire. She jumped onto the hood, still shrieking furiously, and went to work on the windshield. A bloody spiderweb cracked across as Katie slammed her forehead onto it again and again. Wouldn't last much longer. John's crying was deafening in the suffocating space. I unhooked him from his car seat, clutched him to my chest, and covered him with my body as I ran towards the front door of the house. Behind me, I heard the hiss of our kitchen knife being yanked out of the tire. Ah! Smoke rose from Katie's skin as she ran into the ring of salt that I created around our home. My girlfriend flicked her tongue at me like a snake and hissed. "The child's mine," Katie snarled in a voice not her own. "You know it will happen sooner or later, so I suffer. Give me the child." "Fuck you," I panted. "We can see to it that you lead a touched and blessed life." The thing inside Katie was all smiles and conciliation now that it was trapped outside the circle. "Or we can bring misery to your family for 1,000 generations. You have no idea what we're capable of." My girlfriend paced like a tiger behind the bars, searching for a gap in the salt ring. "The child is more trouble than it's worth. If you will but give me this troublesome thing, we can replace it with another, a better one, and bring you fortune beyond your wildest dreams. If not..." The thing inside my girlfriend brought the butcher's knife to its throat, to Katie's throat. "Do you think the authorities will believe any of this when they find your girlfriend's corpse on your lawn?" I hesitated and glanced at John, still screaming his head off on the porch behind me. Elsie had already told me the odds weren't good. Was I prepared to live like this every hour of every day, till my child was inevitably killed? I bent over John and I hugged his tiny, frail body to my chest. I cradled him in my arms as he wailed. "Okay, fine. You win. Just let my girlfriend go." The thing inside Katie flashed me a hideous grin as I passed John across the salt ring and into its waiting arms. The smile vanished when it saw the necklace that I'd taken off and hidden beneath John's blanket when I'd stooped down to pick him up. I looped it around Katie's neck and yanked her towards me across the ring of salt. My girlfriend's eyes rolled into the back of her head. She crumpled to the ground, convulsing, and I barely managed to snatch John as he fell from her arms. "Ooh. What happened?" Katie stammered, clutching her forehead. John had stopped crying. He was staring at the space where Katie had been standing. If I squinted my eyes, I could barely make out a horrible, distorted shadow clawing at the air in fury. But it was blurry and quick to fade. By the time I helped Katie to her feet, it seemed to have vanished completely. Until John giggled, pointed at the empty air, and waved. When I first spotted the listing on Facebook Marketplace, I was sure that it was a scam. 2 used animatronics dismantled, bundled together, for sale. Discounted, the header read. They were a new seller, with what looked like a fake account that had been quickly set up. It was actually the picture that tipped me off that they were from some Disney attractions. One appeared to be an angled shot of a robot pirate from the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, and the other was what looked like an older model of one of those presidents from the infamous Liberty Square attraction. I told myself that it was too good to be true, but I went ahead and shot the seller a message anyway, let him know I was interested in buying. The reply came quickly. "Hello, thank you for your interest. These items will be auctioned next Monday at a certain storage unit. Please submit info for your spot at the event. Signed, John." That immediately made me reconsider. I didn't really have time to waste wandering all the way downtown for a chance at purchasing these things, and I knew that an auction like this could probably take hours, not to mention shipping, handling, and all the other hidden fees that they could easily attach. I put in my information, but I wasn't expecting more to come from it. I was just about to close my laptop and consider the whole thing a lost cause when the seller DM'd me. "Hey, sorry about the automated message. That was meant to weed out the wishy-washy wannabes. So, you think you want these hunks of junk?" I was relieved to be talking to a real person, but still wary, especially the way that they talked. "Do you have all the parts, including the audio recordings?" I typed back. "Yep, everything's all here, just nobody really interested in them. Truth be told, they're going to the auction, but I figured it easier to sell them outright, to avoid the hassle of having to haul them back out here if they didn't." I mean, that made sense. I was sure the things probably weighed about 100 pounds each, possibly a little more, and since they weren't put together, it just meant extra trips. "The auction's Friday. I could come look at them tomorrow and decide?" I asked. "That would be perfect." John gave me a few more details, like how to find the storage unit, the passcode, and how to get in. He recommended that I bring a small van to haul them in. And then he took the listing off Facebook, promising that he wouldn't sell them to anyone else. "I probably won't be there when you come to check them out, by the way. Is that okay?" I hesitated, thinking maybe this was a scam to try to make me look like I'd be trespassing or something. "The property has cameras, so I know you won't break shit. I can verify everything financially through PayPal too if you make a decision," he added. He drove a hard bargain, so I caved. The storage unit itself was a sore thumb. Off the highway. Probably owned and operated by a single person by the looks of it. I punched in the code John had given me, and the old rickety gate slowly slid open, whining as it did. Most of the units looked like they were either abandoned or destroyed, further worrying me that maybe what I was going to buy wasn't as spectacular as I had hoped, and this whole afternoon had indeed been a waste of time. The unit in question was wedged on the second aisle, right next to a pothole with the lock hanging off of it halfway. I took a breath, and I lifted it up, expecting to be disappointed. Much to my surprise, though, it looked like the pictures I had seen online were accurate. Lodged amid the rest of the metallic parts were several different animatronics, all of which looked like they had been tossed in here without a second thought. I did a quick check of the parts to make sure everything John had told me was there, and then started to pull them out of the unit and onto my flatbed truck. Not exactly rolling in style, but probably headed to better conditions than being trapped in there for the next 25 years, I thought. The pirate was mostly intact, save for the head and one of the arms, which was exactly what John had warned me about. "I think the arm rolled down the slope of the unit, so if you dig, you can find it," he said. Once the bigger parts were on the truck, I did just that. And that was when I saw that there was actually a third animatronic in the mix that he hadn't even listed at all. The one looked like it was in much better shape. It was a big, unpainted and unused male animatronic with no clothes on it. One that looked like it'd probably come from either Tomorrowland or the Main Street USA, because it was in such good condition. The minute I saw it, uncolored gray eyes, no hair, weird toothy smile, I knew it would be perfect for the door greeter of my attraction. I moved the rest of the junk aside, pulled the animatronic out, carefully placing it on the flatbed, and using my rope to tie it down since it was all in one piece. And then I tried to decide if I even had room for the presidential one. Somehow I convinced myself to leave it, figuring that newer animatronics were a better deal, and since the agreement with John had been for 2, I told myself I wasn't stealing. It all would have to go to the scrap heap eventually. So I was really doing him a favor, and he was doing me one too, I decided. Once I was sure the animatronics were snug in the back of the truck, I shot John a message. "Went ahead and grabbed the bots, sending payment now," I said as I drove out of the storage unit. On the way to the haunted house, he shot me a message back, thanking me for the buy, the usual friendly closure for any sale, and I turned my phone over and put it on silent so I wouldn't be distracted while I backed up. My plan was pretty simple. I was going to put the pirate robot in on one of the prop walls, so when tourists passed by, the headless thing would pop out, say its line, and maybe wave its hook hand. The colorless one was a different story, though. It looked so creepy and so lifelike that I knew it had to be near the front door. Maybe I could get a wig and paint its eyes blue, tell folks it was my evil twin, I thought to myself, as I put the truck in park and began to haul them inside. I laid the pirate parts out on my kitchen table and immediately spotted the audio box, deciding to tinker with it after I set up the naked bot in the corner. I took a good look at the machine, impressed with how well it was made, and noticed a few switches in the back, which I guessed were the motion controls. I flipped them all on and off a few times to see if anything worked, but no dice. The thing didn't even make a whisper. And then I sat down and I started working with the wires. My phone buzzed. It was John. "Hey, did you just decide on the pirate bot? You didn't need to pay me for both if you were only getting one." I put the phone back down, realizing that it wouldn't be long before he found out I had taken the newer model. But did he even know it was there? Maybe, maybe not. "Sorry, I figured you went through so much trouble I would just pay forward. Thanks again," I responded. Back to work. Or so I thought. My phone buzzed again, seconds later. "Did you take anything else from the storage unit?" Crap. Well, now I have to explain myself. But still, I decided to bluff my way out. "Is something missing? Sorry, I forgot to lock it back. I could pay a little extra if something was stolen." Okay, that should keep him off my back for a little while, I figured. "There was a third animatronic. It wasn't meant to be sold. Did you see it?" Dull crap. I needed to talk my way out of this. Look, I didn't think it was a big deal. That's why I left the other one. Sorry, but I think this robot's in better shape. Again, I can pay extra if it's worth more." I looked up at the colorless robot, wondering why it had been in the storage unit at all if it wasn't for sale. A flurry of texts popped up from John. "No, that one wasn't meant to leave the premises. Where are you now? I'll come pick it up. Did you turn it on? Don't." And one more that was a little worrisome. "Not safe." The pirate voice box finally got to working at the same instant. A blood-curdling cackle filled the room, making me jump a little. I looked at the messages again, both confused and creeped out by John. And I hate to say it, but his last text made me decide to put the naked robot over in my closet, out of the way and not staring at me while I worked. Maybe it was because it was getting late, but after that weird conversation, I didn't like the way that it was looking at me. Once I put it up, I kept my focus on the pirate bot, trying to not let John's bizarre message freak me out. When my phone buzzed again, this time a call, I was sure it was going to be John announcing he had somehow found my haunted attraction. Private ID. Nervously, I answered the phone and put it on speaker. "Hey boss, you okay? What time do I need to get there to set up for tomorrow?" Pierre, one of my maintenance men. He always called from some landline. Can't tell you how relieved I was to hear him. 6 is fine. Maybe a little earlier. I got some new bots that I'll need help with," I told him. "Sounds good. See you then." Click. I rubbed my eyes tiredly and yawned as I checked the time. Way past sleep. Whatever was going on with the other bot, it would have to wait till morning, I told myself. I stood up and admired the pirate bot, pleased with the progress I had made on it. But what he really needs to make him complete is a prop sword, I thought to myself. Just one more thing. I walked over to the storage closet and opened it up, rummaging through my equipment and then paused. Wait, where was that other bot? I took a step back. I saw that it was leaning to one side over in the hallway. That's not where I put it. Is it? I sighed, realizing it was just too late for me to be remembering. I grabbed the prop sword, trying not to let my half-asleep brain get the better of me. I placed the sword in the hand of the pirate bot, took another step back, grabbing my phone off the counter and taking a snapshot of it. As I did, I got a few more worrisome texts from John. "If turned on, make sure it doesn't go anywhere. Keep an eye on it until I get there, but not for too long. Shoot me your address in the morning so I can get there ASAP. Did you leave? Are you safe? and one more that made me feel uneasy standing there. "We'll trick you. Don't listen." Now he had officially creeped me out. I decided to block him. I turned back towards the hallway, looking at the leaning naked bot just standing there, its colorless eyes staring straight into my soul and weird-ass teeth gleaming in the dim lights. Maybe I should just fucking go home, I thought to myself. But then I reconsidered. If this thing was valuable, John might try to break in here and take it from me. I decided to go get my small dolly so I could wheel it into my office and lock it in there. And it's not that I was buying into those creepy messages, but I kept my eyes on the robot for as long as I could until I turned a corner and went downstairs. My attraction has a total of 3 different stories, by the way, the basement being the most popular for obvious reasons, and also the most cluttered. Pushing aside a few of the prop ghosts and ghouls, I found the dolly, started to head for the stairs. I was halfway there when I tripped over something on the floor and crashed down. "I saw a cracker!" I shouted at the top of my lungs as I rubbed my head from where I'd bumped against one of my old medieval knights. And then I heard a voice from upstairs. "Hey boss, you okay?" "Pierre?" What was he doing here this early? I got up and hauled the dolly upstairs, answering back. Yeah, I just nearly killed myself, but other than that, I'm fine." As I got back to the main floor, I set the dolly aside and looked around. I didn't see Pierre anywhere. And I didn't see the robot where it had been minutes ago. Then I heard his voice again, but it definitely sounded different. "Sounds good." It's coming from the hallway where the robot had been. "Hey, Pierre, if this is a prank, I swear to God, I will fire you." No response. I took a step into the hallway. "Pierre, goddammit, you better answer me right now." "I'll get you." What the fuck? I took a step back to the main room. No longer feeling safe, I went to the pirate bot and reached for the prop sword, holding it right in front of my body as I moved towards the hallway. The first room on the right was a bathroom, followed by the ticket counter and the hallway to my office. I stood a few meters away from the bathroom. I kicked the door in, keeping the prop sword right at eye level. The door swung open and closed just as rapidly. Empty. Next was the ticket booth. It had room for an employee to squeeze in and hide behind a sheet, perfect for scaring little kids as they came in. Not so great now that I was apparently hunting a haunted audio animatronic. I stuck the edge of the sword into the curtain and gently pulled it aside, trying to see anything. It was too dark, so I had to actually physically step into the booth. Nothing. Where the hell was this thing? I cautiously moved down the hallway towards my office, my heart beating out of my chest. There was a silhouette just in the doorway, and I could see its colorless eyes, except they weren't so lifeless anymore. Now they were bright and sharp blue. I didn't even fucking hesitate. I came toward it, swinging the sword quickly and rapidly as I smashed it back into my office and toward my closet. It spewed out some stinky purple blood as it clawed at my face, and I shoved as hard as I could. As it was pushed backward, I felt its cold, lifeless body touch mine, and I thought for sure it whispered something just as I crammed it in the closet and slammed the door. Quickly, I slid my desk over to it and pushed it against the door. I stood back, taking a breath and trying to figure out if I had just gone crazy and attacked a lifeless doll, or something else entirely had happened. And then on the other side, I heard scratching. Hell no. I pushed the desk as far against the door as I could, and then I reached into my pocket and got my storage keys out. Latching it tight, I took a step back to see if it would hold. I jumped back a few feet. Nope, time to get out of there. This morning, I've had a chance to compose myself. I had a little coffee. I jotted down as much detail about the incident. I guess I could file a police report or something. After I left last night, I told myself it was all a strange fever dream. Walking into the haunt, I heard the soft sound of footsteps, and I stood still. Pierre? That you? He popped his head around the corner and waved. Hey, boss, you okay? My entire body relaxed, and I walked down the hallway. Better now that I've seen you, I said, as I whipped out my phone and decided to unblock John, and Pierre kept sweeping. You need to come pick this thing up, I messaged as I opened my office door. On the floor, I saw bits of the strange blood the thing had spewed out on me, scattered across the closet. The closet that was now open. Oh, shit. Got out, I thought. Pierre, did you go in there? I asked, cautiously stepping towards it. Oh, I forgot to tell you. Some guy showed up. Said he was going to take care of whatever's in there. He shouted from the other hall as I creeped the door open. I saw what little was left of the bot. Mangled and destroyed. Oh, hell no, that's not good, I said as I decided to call John. It rang a few times as I paced the room. I've been trying to contact you, he said. Save me the speech. Just come and get the rest of your shit, I snapped. I will as soon as you give me your address, John shot back. I clenched the phone hard and I froze in place. What? I thought you came by this morning. My eyes darted down the hallway. I didn't see Pierre anywhere. I heard John take a breath. Give me your address. Now. And then I heard a voice from behind me. Hey, boss. You okay? I woke up what felt like an eternity later in a hospital bed, feeling high off my eyeballs on painkillers. Nothing ached anymore, nothing even tingled. Compared to the ball of pain I'd been in when I was in the tank, this was heaven. The room was small, with 4 white walls and a machine that beeped every time my heart thumped in my chest. The sun shone through a window on my right, just peeking through the clouds. It must have been out all night. Regardless, I was glad just to be alive. Then, everything that had transpired in the past 24 hours came rushing back to me. Disturbing images of a gigantic insect munching on me, with jagged teeth flashed through my mind, its wiry legs sliding over my limbs. I tried to shake the thought from my head, blinking my eyes a couple of times to bring back the present. That was when I noticed the person slumped over on the chair next to me. Her head was resting on her shoulder. Her whole body leaning to the left. Strands of her red hair were hanging over her face while a pile of comic books lay on her lap. A smile crept across my face. She really was determined not to leave me again. Hey, I croaked. My dry throat mangled the words as it came out of my mouth. Emily stirred but didn't wake up. I swallowed, trying to work up the saliva to speak clearly. Hey. Emily's eyes jerked open. She blinked a few times before looking up to see that I was staring back at her. Ty! She raced to my side, completely forgetting about the comic books on her lap, which spilled all over the place. I thought you'd never wake up, Emily said, putting her hand on my cheek. How are you feeling? Honestly, I feel amazing. But I think it's the morphine, or whatever they gave me. Yeah. Well, you took a fucking beating last night. I'm getting survivor's guilt just thinking about it. You should see the other guy. Emily's face softened. A look of affection spreading across her. My heart beginning to flutter in my chest, causing the ECG machine to make a series of oddly timed beeps. Look, I'm not good at saying sappy shit. You know that, Emily said, lowering her eyes as her cheek began to glow pink. But? I asked expectantly. Emily rolled her eyes, punching me softly in the arm. But I want to, for you. So here goes. She took my hand in hers, exhaled slowly, and looked me right in the eye as she spoke. I know I'm someone who always gets herself, and others, into dangerous situations, but for as long as I can remember, you've always been the one who's protected me during them. Even at school, when the other kids would talk shit to me because I used to dress like a punk, you always stood up for me. I never had to ask you to do that. I always looked up to you, she said, giving my hand a squeeze. Emily bit her lip, briefly pausing to whip her short hair behind her ear. Then, when we first went to the tank, you still protected me, even if it was super obvious that I was being completely reckless by pushing you guys to go in there. After Jeremy died, I called you to tell you how I felt, but my dumbass parents wouldn't even let me talk to you. She hung her head, eyes staring down at the bedsheets. Then we moved away, and I spent 10 years not knowing if I was ever going to see you again, missing you every day. And then I came back here, and you actually still wanted to be my friend after everything that happened with Jeremy. Not only that, but you almost got killed protecting me. Emily paused for a moment, and thank God for that. I didn't know if my heart could take any more. Look, Em, she held a finger in my lips, flashing me a serious look. I'm not done. Okay, I said, holding my free hand up in defense. She took a deep breath and continued. But it's not just that. You always know how to make me laugh, but in a way that doesn't make me want to smash your brains in. You're sweet, caring, and you're pretty cute despite being a dork. I guess what I'm saying is... Before I could respond, Emily leaned in and kissed me. Time stopped for a moment as Emily invaded all my senses. Her soothing palm on my cheek, the smell of her fruity perfume, and the minty freshness of her breath was all I could taste. Her soft lips felt amazing as they pressed up against mine, sending a warm, fuzzy feeling cascading over my face. It felt like the kiss would never end. But she finally relented to come up for air. I opened my eyes to see her looking back at me. Eyes seemed to glow as she smiled at me. I love you, Tyler. Relief flooded through me, my heart leaping with joy. There was so much I wanted to say. I wanted my own monologue. I wanted to tell her everything I loved about her. How she was so brave, inspiring, determined, smart, and resourceful. How she refused to give up. Had a heart of gold under a seemingly cold exterior. And was super cute on top of all that. But I knew I could sum all that up in 4 words. I love you too. Emily's face cracked into a wide grin, the happiest I think I'd ever seen her. Now that all that was out of the way, I couldn't help myself. I wanted to kiss her again. I leaned in slowly. Emily followed my lead, but the moment was interrupted by the sound of the door into the room swinging open. I opened my eyes to see an older woman wearing a white coat leering at us with a disapproving look in her eyes. You can get your jollies off later. Right now you need to rest. 3 broken ribs. A badly infected wound on my leg that required a dozen stitches to close, a minor concussion, and a heap of cuts and bruises. That was the official write-up by the hospital. Luckily I had insurance, so I was able to stay in a relatively decent room while I was being nursed back to health. The pain meds kept me from struggling too much, although my breathing continued to be slightly impaired due to the aforementioned broken ribs. I had a number of visitors during my stay in the hospital. The most regular being Emily, who came in just about every day to see me. Having her by my side was what made the stay seem to fly by, as each day she would bring me something to read or watch. I even snuck in a few snuggles when the staff wasn't around. Emily also filled me in on what happened after I had passed out in the tank. The guard and her had managed to get me out with the assistance of the other security personnel. During the rescue, she told them everything that had happened, from our first visit to the tank to our last. Having literally witnessed a zombie lady disappear in front of his eyes, he was more inclined to believe our story, even backing her up in front of his colleagues who were in disbelief. In exchange for the guards not reporting our breaking and entering to the police, Emily agreed to pay for the repairs to the tank's hatch. But Emily wasn't the only visitor I received during my stay. It was late on a Wednesday afternoon. I'd been in the hospital for 2 weeks and begun to feel a lot better. Breathing was easier, my chest didn't hurt as much, and I was beginning to walk around on clutches without much difficulty. Emily had popped out to go to the shops when Special Agent Garrison confidently strode into the room. "Tyler Schwartz," he said, looking me up and down through his signature black sunglasses. I immediately sat up on my bed, stunned by his sudden arrival. "Agent Garrison." "You look like you've seen better days," he remarked. I swallowed, unsure of how to respond. Yeah, things are getting better, though." He nodded. We sat in silence for a few moments. I wondered if he knew what had happened. Surely he did, if he was here. "The rumor around town is that you and Emily DeStoro were at the water tank on the edge of town 2 weeks ago," Garrison said. "Well, you know, people say a lot of things," I said, trying not to show that I was freaking out inside. "Relax. I'm not here to arrest you." I exhaled, not realizing I'd been holding my breath. "If everything I heard from that security guard is correct, you're trying to help the person who took the life of your best friend, Jeremy Williams," Garrison said, taking a seat next to me. "You might not know this, but I've lost a number of good colleagues during my time with the FBI. Some I would go as far as to describe as my friends. I know what it's like to lose a friend. And to tell you the truth, I was secretly rooting for you, Tyler. I believe there's forces in this world more powerful than we can imagine, both positive and negative." He paused for a moment, and I waited in anticipation for him to continue. "From what I understand, there is an evil here in Parsky. I believe you've cleansed part of it, but I don't believe it's fully disappeared yet. I'm willing to commit myself to finding out what's going on in this town, and I just wanted to thank you for inspiring me to do so." I was taken aback by this. I had always regarded Garrison as the most understanding cop that I'd ever spoken to during the entire tank saga, but I had no idea he believed in the supernatural. Regardless, it was good to have him on my side. He'd very deliberately told us last time that if we interfered in his investigation again, he'd have no choice but to arrest us. What was more intriguing was what he said about Parsky. Did this mean that Margaret was only the beginning of the darkness that existed in this town? Were there more demons and zombies yet to be unearthed? Wait, you think there's more evil in Parsky? Do you know where to find it? I asked. Garrison patted me on the shoulder before standing up and moving to the foot of my bed. "I have an idea." A week later, I was out of the hospital. My ribs having fully healed, I could now confidently walk around on crutches, and the wound in my leg had disappeared. A round scar replaced it. Having only booked a week at the hotel I was staying at, I had nowhere to go. But thankfully, Emily talked her uncle into letting me crash at his for a little while. While I was there, Emily and I talked about our future, given the fact that it was now time for each other to return to different cities and continue our lives. In the end, we decided that we'd give long distance a shot. I know the odds of it working out weren't great, but I was prepared to put the effort in because Emily was certainly worth it. Emily only had 1 year left in her degree, so she promised once she finished, she would move to Missouri to look for work and be with me. I told her that she didn't have to sacrifice so much, but she put her foot down on the matter, and I'm not one to challenge her when she's that determined. On our last day in Parsky, I joked that we should go back to the tank, light it on fire, burn that godforsaken thing to the ground. "Well, we can't do that, but we could light the sky on fire," she responded, digging around in her bedside table to produce the bag of fireworks she'd bought way back when. "I can't believe you still have those." "Wouldn't let such a high-quality firework go to waste." "So, where do you want to go?" That night, Emily drove us up to the top of Ellendale Hill, named after a famous settler who passed through Parsky on their way to establishing a settlement nearby. We bought some beer, snacks, and of course the fireworks. From the top of the hill, we could see the lights of the city, twinkling in the distance, as well as the water tank looming over the town. "Cheers," we said in unison, clinking our bottles together. I took a swig of the bitter brew. It'd been a while since I'd had any alcohol, and right now, this cold beer tasted better than it ever had. I looked over to see that Emily was staring at me, goofy look on her face. "What?" I asked. "Oh, nothing. Just like looking at your dumb face." Guess you're lucky I put up with your abuse then. Oh, poor you. Here, let me make it up to you. We kissed, our warm bodies pressed together in the cold night. Okay. Now, if that wasn't enough, let me light up the sky in appreciation for you, Emily said, crawling over to the fireworks display that she had set up earlier. There was still one thing nagging me that I wanted to mention before she did, because it's not like it was something I could mention when fireworks were going off. Hey, wait. Before you do, I said, putting my arm on hers. Emily whipped her head back to me, green eyes shining in the night. What? I just want you to do one thing for me. Oh, come on, I already told you. I'm not doing that because I'm not that kind of girl, she protested. I rolled my eyes, suppressing the inner urge to laugh. No, not that, you idiot. Emily sighed. Fine, what is it? I want you to forgive yourself for everything that happened. With Jeremy. That appeared to catch Emily off guard, as she was rendered speechless with no quick-fire retort to be heard. I know you still blame yourself for what happened because it was your idea, and you encouraged us to join you, I explained, squeezing her arm. I just wanted to say I don't blame you, and I never have. We made a decision to go there together, just like you and I did this time. You need to let go of that belief that you're responsible. Emily sighed, running her hand through her hair. But I was... No buts. I want you to promise me, I said. This time it was Emily's turn to roll her eyes. Ugh, fine, you got me. I just miss him so much. So do I. But I don't blame myself for his death. Okay, say it. I don't blame myself. Promise? Emily nodded. For Jeremy, I promise. Good. Now can I get on with this? Took a lot of effort to set this up, you know. Go for it. So we sat and watched the sky turn into a shower of color and light. Emily's head resting on my shoulder, and my arms wrapped around her. And for a brief moment, I swear I saw a spirit floating above the tank, dancing from one spark to the next. His face looking very, very familiar. The moment we left Earth's atmosphere, I could feel that something was off. Although it seemed like mission start jitters, I couldn't shake the feeling no matter what I did. For some reason, it took 5 months of voyaging into the dark depths of space before my uneasy feeling was warranted. Our mission was simple, one that had been performed countless times before. It was nothing more than a supply run to our colony on Europa. The colony seemed like an inadequate word for what the nearly 10-year-old society had become. The humble colony base had expanded from its original 100 families set 10 years ago. Population had grown as children were born and new families moved from their lives on Earth to the Europa colony. Nearly 6,000 people now called the moon of Jupiter their home. Almost 150 years before I was even born, scientists on Earth had developed such unique terraforming technology that nearly any rocky surface on the galaxy could be altered into a livable area. The machines worked so well that entire planets could sustain life in as little as a year after placing them on the surface. But the colony was fully autonomous, like all the other colonies we had made in the solar system. Certain luxuries were always in high demand from our homeworld. Data chips containing thousands of episodes of new shows or entertainment, complex snacks and treats that were difficult to make within the colonies, and other various items that the settlement might not have the correct facilities to produce themselves. Our supply drop this time contained mostly exotic foods, which was typical. What wasn't standard was the 4 crates that were completely void of any markings beyond the symbol for interdimensional travel. The mark seemed confusing and out of place on the crates, especially with no context. The manifest made no mention of what they were, and according to our laws and my job description, we could not open them without severe consequences. You can't help but feel insignificant as you sit on the ship, staring out through the window at the vast void of space. The sense of wonder that bumbles up inside you as you ponder what all could be out there. As advanced as we had gotten, and as quickly as we were expanding out into the reaches of space, we still hadn't found any form of foreign life forms. I mean, sure, we had seen some alien bacteria, some small cell clusters of living things, but nothing significant enough to have a central nervous system, let alone a brain. Nothing anywhere near the aliens or monsters once seen in movies and television shows. As I sat there arbitrarily contemplating our existence, the comms in my quarters chimed. The voice of my closest friend and co-worker, Sable, sounded over the speakers. He sounded just as bored as I was. And sadly, working aboard a supply ship's nowhere near as glamorous or exciting as, say, an exploratory vessel or something like that. A lot of our time is spent simply waiting as our ship putts along towards our destination. It's not fair for me to say. The fact that we can make the trip from Earth to Europa in less than a month is stunning. And I feel like I've just become jaded from having made this journey back and forth so many times, with little to no excitement in our travels. Hey John, you want to meet down to the mess hall for a drink? Damn, Sable, you know just what to say to pull at my heartstrings, I replied. His deep bellowing laugh sounded through the speakers before saying, Perfect, see you down there. Sable was a large, melanin-heavy guy, broad shoulders, and what at first glance just appeared to be a thicker frame made up his appearance. However, upon closer inspection, you'd realize that the guy was solid as a brick. Most of his bulk was, in fact, an impressive amount of muscle. How intimidating and almost scary Sable looked in direct contrast to his personality. He'd become my best friend because of his overwhelmingly positive and kind nature. He loved to joke around and laugh, as well as had an innate drive to help anyone who needed it. The two of us were general maintenance crew for the ship. We were glorified janitors with the clearance of the first officer. They kept us in the loop for all the goings-on around the ship, which was nice, but if it ever came to the major strategic solutions or anything like that, we were bottom of the barrel as to who they would ask for help. It's a strange feeling when you walk on the ship. Not physically, of course. Just feels like walking. But when you realize the ship is moving around 535,000 miles an hour, it feels surreal. That was our ship's top speed, in fact. I heard a few years ago that science vessels on higher class ships could reach light speed just as their cruising speed. I also heard that they might have some kind of quantum drive or something, that they could form a black hole in the front of a ship, somehow move it around, letting its gravity pull them through space at insane speeds. I mean, these were just rumors. And I'm far from an engineer, so I don't know how that would work, or if it's even true. You gonna stand there looking like a sad puppy out the window? You can come in for that drink, Sable said, breaking my gaze into the blackness of space. I'm coming, drunkie. Relax, I replied with a smile. As we entered the room and sat down, Sable poured us both a large glass of a wonderfully smooth and expensive bottle of bourbon whiskey, one that he'd picked up on a last trip. Something about the change in gravity or the way that it was terraformed made most alcohol from Titan excellent. Because of this, a lot of the solar system's booze was now distilled on Saturn's moon. There was one other thing about Titan I always enjoyed whenever we made our supply drops. The view of the sky was nothing short of breathtaking. I'm sure that for the people that lived there, it had grown mundane, but for us, seeing Saturn crawl so closely across the sky, mixed with the pink and amber tint the atmosphere created there, always left me in pure amazement. So many random thoughts floated across my mind as the whiskey passed over my lips. Questions and curiosities flowed through my brain as unencumbered as the liquid in my glass moved from glass to stomach. Do you ever wonder what it's like back before the terraformers? You mean back when we were all trapped on Earth? Sable replied. From what I remember in history, it was nothing but wars and fighting over needless problems. What do you mean by needless problems? I asked, putting the two words in half-assed air quotes with my glass hand. It was back when our society was still heavily set on various religions. Massive groups of people fought wars, slaughtered countless people in the belief that it was for whatever god they believed in. The divide amongst the various religions split our entire society completely. Yeah, I remember hearing about that now. That was before we all realized that science would get us further than any of the religions would. Once we realized that, all the nations united, and it's the start of the major technology explosion. I remember the history lesson, but you're missing my actual question. What do you think it was like to live back then? Shit, I don't know, man. Sounds like it'd be horrible. And could you imagine wasting all that time on politics and crap? Sable replied. I took another warm, smooth sip of my whiskey before answering. And that's not even to mention all the other stupid concerns that we were having back then. What do you mean? Well, you remember people were worried about race, and I was interrupted by the robotic voice of the intercom overhead. Maintenance crew to the bridge. Sable hung his head and shook it before looking at his glass, still half full of the strong whiskey. He gave me a very annoyed look before finishing the glass in one massive gulp. I groaned at the intercom's request, wishing that we had given a few more hours worth of break, but clearly that wasn't the case. What do you think it is this time? Sable asked as we stood at the table. I don't know. We probably forgot how to adjust the big comfy chairs again or something. Sable laughed as I finished the rest of my drink, and we made our way to the bridge. Freighters were, by no stretch of the imagination, small ships. However, the distance from the mess hall to the bridge was at least a 10 to 15 minute walk, and based on previous experience of why they needed us on the bridge, we were in no rush. Hey, I was just thinking, I started as we walked along the primary vacant hallways. How long have we been traveling? We should be near Europa, shouldn't we? I wonder if there's something wrong with the equipment, as they run through the final approach checklist. Yeah, I guess we should be getting pretty close, shouldn't we? Well, if that's the case, it would be the first thing to make this trip even remotely interesting. Sable shot me a joking smile before continuing. If that is why they need us down there, maybe we should pick up our pace. Sable and I quite enjoy our jobs. They've been working together as a team for longer than I care to mention. But as much as we love it, we also love to complain about it. I've always thought that playful teasing usually means you like it, just like little kids on a playground. With that in mind, Sable and I tend to fill our day with a plethora of jokingly talking shit about our work and the people that we worked with. In reality, I wouldn't trade my job for anything. It fits my personality quite well, and I think the same goes for Sable, although I couldn't read his mind or anything, so it's just an assumption. Either way, without another word, we both picked up our pace to just under a jog. When we reached the bridge, it was obvious that something a little more serious was going on. People were running around frantically, shouting questions about what they saw or read. The main screen showed nothing but a glitching picture scrambled with heavy amounts of static. I stood there just taking in all I saw as my brain screamed in my head, asking what we had just walked into. Sable placed his hand on my shoulder, causing me to look over at him before he spoke. Let's find out what they need us up here for. I simply nodded in response before stopping one of the navigation officers. Hey, what's your name? What's going on up here? The man looked dumbfounded that I didn't know what was happening, but quickly regained his composure and answered me. My name is Tanik, and as far as what's going on, I think you need to ask the captain. All I know is we got a weird message, and then I think that the communication array went out. It's been frantic up here ever since. With the last comment, Tanik hurried off to another side of the bridge and stared at screens to do whatever it is he did. I shot Sable a weird but slightly confused look, which he returned. We both knew that if the navigation officer was correct and the comm array was damaged, we would have to suit up and work outside the ship. I hated working outside the ship, especially while we were moving. I'd only had to do it a handful of times, but although you and your tools and equipment are all moving through space at the same speed, the danger factor ramps up tenfold. On the other hand, I knew that we still had at least a day or so before we would be slowing down and starting an orbit around the moon. That meant that if we needed to repair anything outside the ship, it would need to be done now, and we'd still be moving while we worked. Since Sable is in no way hesitant to solve any problems, he just yelled out over the noise of everyone else talking. Hey Cap, what's the problem? What do you need us for? Captain Alex Dreyer had been captain of the freighter for longer than Sable and I had been assigned. He'd always been a fantastic captain, especially for putting up with our crap all these years. We had become relatively close. Because of this, it was odd to see his callous and rude reaction to Sable's question. The fuck do you think is wrong? Look around you. Our comms are down. We just received a cryptic transmission from Europa's surface. So get your asses outside, get our ears back up. Sable and I simply nodded before turning around and walking towards the nearest airlock. I had a strange feeling that there was far more to what happened to bring the comms down. Nobody seemed to act like there was any sort of impact with anything. And we looked to be the only ship in the area. Those were the only two options in my head that would account for the array to drop as suddenly as they say it did. I could see the smoke, blurted Sable. You, what? Where? I mean, from your ears. You're clearly focused hard on a thought. What is it? Oh, right. Man, do you think something else is going on? I started. There was something about the way the Cap was talking that has me curious. Did you get that vibe from him too? I suppose, a little. Right now we need to fix this thing so that we can see what's going on, which means starting by getting out there, seeing how bad the damage is. It's pretty jarring. It's the first time you ever step outside a spacecraft, moving at hundreds of thousands of miles per hour through space. For some reason, you always expect to be hit by wind rushing past or extreme resistance. However, the reality is there's no friction, no resistance. You're already moving at the same speed as the ship, making it much more like swimming in a calm lake or pond than anything else. The real risk is the thought that if you were to get tagged by even the smallest pebble floating through the void at that speed, it'd be the equivalent of taking a light-speed rocket directly to your chest. Luckily, the ship's shields deflect anything like that with ease, and still, it remains a terrifying thought. Not only tied to each other, but also to the ship itself, we moved carefully along the hull towards the communications array. The trip wasn't far, but the caution we took, I'm sure, made our inspection take longer than the captain would have wanted. Hey, John, come check this out, Cable spoke into the radio. As I rounded the corner and stepped into the backside of the array, I immediately knew what he was trying to show me. A cover panel was dented and damaged, leaving a significant gap in the metal. And the opening that had been made, I could see that several wires had been severed and a small circuit board was smashed. The hell? How is that possible that we even got hit by anything? Not only are the shields up, it's on the backside of the array, I said, bewildered. Which means that it had to have been going the same direction as us, and much faster than us, and slipped past the shields, Cable responded. But that's crazy, right? I mean, the odds of that happening would be so incredibly low, right? Yeah. It'd be like winning the lottery while being struck by lightning on a cloudless day. It'd be like taking a... Before I could keep going, the captain's voice passed through the radio. Have you two figured that out yet? We need that fixed immediately. Our communication and navigation systems are down until you can get that fixed. We're running blind right now, so you better have some good news for me. Before I answered, I looked closer into the hole in the panel. Then, reaching inside, I gripped an object that rendered me speechless. As I pulled it out and held it up for Sable to see, he began to speak for me. Oh, Captain, somehow we got hit by a stone about the size of a golf ball. Are you fucking with me, Sable? Because I advise you to know this is far from a good time to be fucking with me. Especially if you don't want to be left on Europa and relieved of your job. No, sir. I wish I could explain how it happened, but John just fished the stone out of one of the rear compartments. He's holding it up in front of me right now. How quickly can you fix it? We could probably have it back up in an hour as long as there isn't damage deeper in. Suddenly some of the ionic lightning crackled around us, interrupting Sable. It crackled and popped just above the ship's hull for a few seconds, as we stared blankly at it in wonder. Static screamed louder over the radios, hurting our ears. Doubling over and holding our helmets in a pointless attempt to quiet the screeching from the radio, I screamed from the pain. Sparks and burns formed at our feet as two small objects flew from the strange orb of electricity just as quickly as it appeared. The radio fell silent and the sphere of lightning vanished. After regaining my composure, I looked at the hull near my feet. There were two slimy spikes that looked to be made of some foreign type of rock lodged into the steel. Just in front of my eyes, the slime slid from the spikes. It found itself and disappeared into the ship through the same holes the spikes made. Sable and I shot each other a frightened look before I started calling out over the radio. Captain Dryer, we have a situation? I don't know how to describe what just happened, but I think something got into the ship. Captain, can you hear me? What in the Sam Hill you're talking about, John? What do you mean something got in the ship? The captain snarled. Actually, never mind, just get the fucking comms back on now. But, Captain, don't give me that shit. Just get it done, John. I just shook my head. Maybe I imagined it. After all, the alcohol we drank earlier was highly potent. Yes, Captain. We'll get it done as soon as possible. I feel like Sable must have had a similar train of thought running through his mind, because as the thoughts raced through my head, we worked in complete silence to return the communications array to working order. After nearly 30 minutes, Sable finally broke the silence. Okay, I'm with you, John. Something more has to be going on. You're right. Captain's clearly on edge about something. Plus, what was that storm? I've never seen anything like that, have you? Dude, I thought I was insane seeing that. You saw it too, right? What happened? What was that? I responded. I have no idea. And even more so, I have no idea how to describe what we saw to Cap. As we finished our repairs, we grabbed the stone spikes and the rock lodged inside the hole in the array. It was the only thing we could think of to prove our story. Unfortunately, being a freighter, the ship didn't have any form of science officer. The closest thing that we had was simply a medical officer. He was pretty nice if we got injured, but explaining what we had encountered outside the ship was not exactly in their area of expertise. Returning to the bridge, I expected some sort of good job, guys. We have communications back up. However, it was overshadowed by the chaos being transmitted over the speakers. Glitched and grainy video appeared on the main screen, while shouts and screams erupted over the comms. In the background, you could hear a voice chanting in some archaic language, one I'd never heard before. Leandra, can you hear me? This is Captain Alex Dryer of the freighter-class ship Luxtrus. Please respond. What's happening on the surface? The captain continued repeating that same script, trying to get the colony's governor, Leandra, to respond with something that made any form of sense. The first officer, a 20-something-year-old man named Cody Nichols, kept calling out various commands and requests for information to the crew. We need to get to the surface as soon as possible. What's our status? We've already begun our approach to the moon, sir. We'll be in orbit and be able to send out the landers in 18 hours, the navigation officer said. Make sure the landers are prepared and ready to depart as soon as possible. I don't know what's going on down there, but they clearly need our help, Officer Nichols called out over the comms of the shuttle bay. After a few more attempts by the captain to get a coherent response, the link cut out completely. The captain instantly looked over at Sable and me before speaking to the other crew members on the bridge. Did the array just fail again? Come on, people. We are in a situation here. I need to know what's going on. I thought you two fixed it. Before I could speak, the communications officer answered his question. No, sir, our array is working just fine. Unfortunately, Europa cut the connection on their end. All attempts at getting them back are going ignored. I looked at Sable and could hardly imagine my expression, knowing that my body and mind were filled and racing. Racing with so many different emotions like confusion, terror from what it sounded like over the transmission, but also equal parts anxiety and intrigue. Move, you two! The captain shouted, pulling me from my trance. Sable grabbed my arm, and the two of us left to prep the landing vehicles. We never restored contact with the colony on the surface of Europa. Sable and I prepped the shuttles, finishing up just as the ship settled into orbit above the settlement. An eerie sense of foreboding flooded the decks of the ship. I knew I wasn't the only one to feel it, as I could see the same strange discomfort in every other crew member. Although Sable and I were the only two who had worked on prepping the landing vessels as we approached, I noticed that the strange crates that had been loaded just before the landing crew departed. Hey, whoa, wait. Did you see that? See what? Did you load those unmarked crates? The ones that were blank except for the interdimensional symbol? No shit. Were we supposed to? They were already loaded. I didn't load them. If you didn't either, then how the hell did I just see them on the landers before they left? I said, baffled. There was nothing further we could do at this point, nothing but watch as the shuttles left the ship's dock and left towards the surface of the planet. My heart suddenly began pounding in my chest as if there was some impending doom that the rest of my body had yet to notice. I did my best to slow my heart and think about all the strange events of the past week. I did everything possible to find something that might explain the surge of fear that screamed and raged within my body. Finally, as a cut to the screaming, Sable called out with a great idea. I don't know who moved those crates on the landers, or why the landing crew was acting so strange and hush-hush about loading up and leaving, but I think we should head back to the bridge. Maybe they restored the communications of the colony. At least we have communications with the landing party. We can find out what's going on. Without verbally answering, I simply nodded, and we both left for the bridge. The lengthy walk it took us to get up there gave me ample time to overthink all the things that might be going on. My brain embellished every thought from power system upgrades to full-scale alien invasions to covert military ops. I didn't know what any of it meant, or if any of it meant anything at all. When we finally reached the bridge, our understanding of the situation was hardly illuminated further than the guessing that we had already done. The shuttles remained silent during their approach, other than standard pilot system callouts. Then I heard something I wasn't expecting, which raised alarms in my mind. "Officer Blevins, system status, please," said Captain Dreyer. Officer Seth Blevins was a pilot in charge of the entire landing party. He was a good man. He started his career in the military, and you could see much of that still lingering in his personality when he worked. When he was off duty, however, he was entertaining to spend time with. It was a bit of a practical joker trying to keep things around him lighthearted. "System status normal, sir," Seth responded over the radio. "Something strange happening on the cargo, though. Please advise." "Explain further, officer. What do you mean by strange?" "Sir, I'm not sure how to explain this without sounding like I lost my grip on reality. I've oddly marked cargo on here that's beginning to hum louder the closer we get to the surface. It's also begun to glow brighter and brighter through the cracks in the wood. Captain, please advise. What am I carrying? How dangerous is it?" Call it a morbid fascination, but I desired heavily to be able to see what was going on within the shuttle. Of course, I feared for the safety of Officer Blevins, but my curiosity about what he was seeing was quickly surpassing my concern. "Sorry, officer, that's classified information. Your job is to simply get it to the surface, assist the colony however needed. Officer Novanilla aboard Shuttle 2 will offload the cargo and proceed with his directives." I couldn't help but shoot Sable a look, trying to convey some semblance of, "I told you something was up with the crates." But I knew there was something he was already aware of. The look he returned to me was just as effective as if he had said out loud, "Yeah, no shit." Officer Marco Novanello was a 30-something-year-old guy they got along with very well. I had more than a few handfuls of interactions with him, and although he was very secretive about his personal life, he was very enlightening to talk with. He was very confident and knowledgeable on many topics. At no point during our acquaintanceships did I get even a hint that he would be involved in any secret operations. "Understood, sir. All 3 shuttles are approaching Europa Colony now. Switching comms to attempt to hail colonists." Officer Blevins' voice echoed through the speaker one last time before they landed. The bridge fell silent as everyone sat waiting for the next voice to come through the speakers. Everyone knew there was nothing we could do at that point, except wait. The call might come in any moment. There was no way to tell. It could be 30 minutes or 3 days, or the most stressful option was that we didn't know if it would ever come back. After a few short moments that felt like an eternity, one of the crew broke through the deafening silence that crept over the bridge. "Sir, I've lost all forms of tracking on the shuttle. It's like they just vaporized from existence." "What do you mean?" "You better figure out how to get it back." Okay, sir, I'll see what I can do, but I don't think the problem lies with this equipment. I believe it's on the shuttle's end." As the tension on the bridge rose, so did my anxiety. I began to beg inside of my head for something to break. I selfishly wished for something to fall apart and give me an excuse to go and do anything else. Instead, Sable nudged me in the ribs, which was annoying, but albeit an effective way to get my attention. Only for him to ask me the same questions I was prepared to ask him. What do we do next? While I contemplated my existence, some critical conversation had been happening on the bridge. I only know because as soon as I came back to reality, I was getting yelled at by the captain, having been told what I would be doing next. John, prep the other shuttle. You're going down there. What? Oh, no. I love my job, but I love it more like a, hey, go clean the toilets, not a go investigate the sound of certain death. John, shut up and get on the fucking shuttle. Sable began to tell me to be careful when Captain Dryer interrupted him. You'll be careful too. Your ass is going with him. Sable's smirk quickly faded and was replaced by a silent but visibly apparent groan. Then, as the two of us left the bridge, a crewman began to shout. Captain, scanners picked up 2 shuttles headed our way. One of them is ours, and the other is from the surface. Good. Can you pull them on the screen? No, Captain, I've been trying. There's no response. Captain, another shuttle appeared on the screen. We now have 6 shuttles headed our way. Sable and I never quite made it off the bridge. The sudden excitement held us both in place at the doorway. Far too curious about what was going on, we stood watching everything unfold. A quick look of fear and panic flashed over Captain Dryer's face. It only remained visible for a split second before returning to his typical confident demeanor. John, Sable, change of plans. Get in the dock ahead of the shuttles. Sable responded faster than I could. He told the captain, we'd be happy to, before dragging me by the shoulder away from the bridge. We hurried down the hall silently towards the docking bays. Once we had made it nearly 3/4 of the way there, I couldn't contain myself any longer and had to speak. Dude, doesn't something feel extremely off to you? Nothing about this feels right. Yeah, no shit, John. There's some very serious shit going down right now, but of course it doesn't feel right. None of this should feel right. We watched out the giant bay door through the invisible plasma door that held back the harshness of open space. The first 3 shuttles approached slowly but awkwardly, almost as if whoever was flying it was intoxicated to some extent. Shit, look out! Sable yelled just as the first shuttle sped through the barrier. Sable pushed me out of the way and dove just barely in time to avoid getting crushed as the shuttle slammed into the dock. The second and third shuttles sped into the bay, crashing against the back wall as if mimicking the first shuttle. Sparks flew, chunks of metal shot through the air, and the insanely loud sound of bending and scraping steel filled the area. Scrambling to my feet, I looked over the wreckage that nearly killed both Sable and me. My comm chirped, and Captain Dryer's voice immediately screamed through the small handheld device. What the actual fuck is going on down there? Before I could answer, one of the shuttle doors opened, and 2 colonists stumbled out. There was something wrong with them. Beyond the wounds sustained from the crash, they looked severely disfigured and bloodied. My mouth hung agape as my brain sparked and smoked, and ground gears trying to process everything happening as fast as possible. The 2 colonists spotted me and began to shuffle toward me. Just before I turned to Sable, a dark silhouette emerged from the shuttle behind them and suddenly seemed to phase from existence. With my brain overheating, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, I wasn't entirely sure if what I had seen had truly happened or not. Look out! Sable yelled from behind me. His warning only made a split second before the following 2 shuttles burst through the barrier and crashed behind the first 3. 2 of the shuttles smashed the 2 colonists in front of me, rendering them into nothing more than red streaks of blood and a faint memory. I turned and sped as fast as my legs would carry me towards Sable and the main door to exit the docking bay. As I covered half the distance between myself and the door, the final shuttle slammed into the wall directly behind us. Chunks of metal flew through the air, and 2 spots on my back suddenly burned and flooded my body with pain. Some piece of the shuttle tagged Sable in the right shoulder, causing him to spin and trip over his own feet. As he turned and tripped, the look on Sable's face seemed to shift suddenly from surprise to sheer terror. He hit the ground just inside the doorway, and in as few motions as I could manage, I grabbed him by the arm and dragged him through. As soon as he cleared the door, I smashed my hand into the controls, slamming and locking the door. As we sat there, catching our breath, Sable's comlink chirped, causing me to realize that I had apparently thrown mine as the shuttle took the 2 colonists. Even with my adrenaline at full throttle, I could feel the pain set in as I thought the back of my shirt began to seem wet. Sable's shoulder was bleeding profusely, and a massive chunk of shuttle protruded from the wound. It looked deep, very severe. What's happening down there? We have damage reports flooding our control panels up here, Captain Dryer yelled through the comlink. Captain, all 6 of the shuttles crashed into our docking bay. It's like they didn't even try to slow down. Oh, god damn it! Sable winced in pain and yelled out, causing him to stop mid-sentence. I took the comlink from him and began to explain as best as I could. What we had just witnessed still had my mind going full tilt, trying to make sense of it. Captain, something's wrong with the colonists. They look deformed or mutated or something like that. I don't know if any survivors are still in there or not. Sable and I are alive, but we both sustained severe injuries. The door is shut and locked, and we're going to try to get ourselves to medbay before we both bleed out. Have either of you come in contact with anything unusual down there? Asked the captain. I was truly dumbfounded at the captain's ridiculous question, which caused me to leave a pause before answering. Anything strange? Are you fucking serious? Nothing down here is normal. All this is unusual and quite honestly, fucked up. I'm sending security down there. I'm putting the two of you getting to medbay as the highest priority. Anyone in your area should rush you and help you there. The medical officer is also on her way to meet you to start patching you up. The captain continued talking, but I missed anything else that he said, as I currently watched a strange creature phase into existence nearly 80 yards from us. It had a body similar to a salamander. Its skin was black and appeared wet or slimy. It had 8 thin, ribbon-like legs that extended not in any form of foot, but instead was tipped with long, bony blades. The long, slimy tail was lined on top and sides with 3 rows of bone-made blades or curved spikes, starting from the bottom of the beast's torso and running the length of its tail. If the creature had eyes on its playing card-shaped head, it was either too far to see, or the same abyssal black color as the creature's skin. The beast turned towards us and raised its head, revealing a sarlacc pit-style mouth. It was perfectly circular and lined with sharp yellowed teeth, sticking out in all directions. It looked like the mouth of a lamprey had been taken, enlarged, and slightly distorted, and then placed on the nightmare that stood before us. The beast turned away from us, took a few steps before fading out of visibility. What the fuck was that? Did you see that thing? I shouted as I began to lift Sable onto his feet. What was what? You didn't see that thing, the thing that just phased in and out down the hallway. Sorry, I'm busy trying to keep blood inside my body. Speaking of which, we need the doctor, preferably before I bleed out. Even when faced with possible death, Sable had the ability to remain the same calm smartass that he always was. Regardless of his joking tone, I knew that the danger was very much real. And I immediately began walking him as best as I could down the hall. All the while, warnings and caution screamed through my head. I still had no idea what to make of what I had seen. The only thing I knew about the creature was that it in no way appeared even remotely friendly. The medical officer, Dr. Julia Scorin, finally met us in the hallway after traversing 3/4 of the journey to medbay. She immediately used a small handheld device that used some laser or something over both of our wounds. Before we went any further, I don't know if it actually did anything to heal the wounds, but I do know that whatever the little device did caused any bleeding to stop instantly. When we finally made it to medbay, Dr. Scorin helped me lay Sable face down on a table attached to some giant machines. She did something with her little handheld scanner device, and Sable instantly fell asleep. I realized that it was some form of full unconscious anesthetic. She typed a few things into the console panel, and the table slid inside the machine. I watched as a set of robotic arms began removing the large chunk of metal from his shoulder. Once the shuttle part was released, the arm changed to a different tip and began synthetically rebuilding Sable's muscle and skin tissue. That wound was nasty. It'll probably take a few hours for the machine to finish, Dr. Scorin said before starting to work on my wound. Lay down on your stomach, over here. I walked over and laid down, but before I could ask any questions or really say anything, Dr. Scorin used her little handheld device on me, and the world around me went black. I never expected to dream under anesthesia, but strange and beautiful visions emerged through the darkness. Dreams of a family that I had not yet met, dreams of worlds I had never seen and people I had never known. A world populated by little more than endless seas of mushrooms, planets covered in infinite music festivals, and insane centipede-like monsters creeping slowly through a foreign jungle. Then came the screams. Faint sirens and alarms began to alter my thoughts. Distant screams and cries of terror invaded my psyche. My eyes fluttered open, revealing a destroyed room. Faint sirens and alarms began to alter my thoughts. Distant screams and cries of terror invaded my psyche. My eyes fluttered open, revealing a destroyed room. Alarms sounding throughout the ship, flickering lights, and Sable's face yelling at me to get the fuck up. Finally, after a few moments of being completely disoriented, my brain caught up with what I saw. Once he saw that I was more or less awake, Sable grabbed me by the arm and began leading me off the table and out of the medbay. I stopped Sable as we reached the doorway to leave. Dude, what the fuck is going on? I don't know. I woke up about 2 minutes before I woke you. Whatever it is, it's bad. The creature I had seen in the hallway flashed in my mind, and my heart began to race. What had all happened while the two of us were knocked out? Pulsating red lights glowed in every room and hallway throughout the ship as the red alert siren continuously sounded. As the two of us entered the hallway, I could see various access panels on the walls had been ripped off, and sparks shot periodically into the hall. Sable, I'm with you, man. Of course I am. But what's our plan? I don't know. My first thought is to get to the bridge and find the captain, so I guess that's the plan. Okay, I'm for it. Let's get moving. Sable nodded at me, and we both went silent, creeping low and slow through the hallway towards the bridge. There was no signs of any other crew that I could see. The ship felt abandoned, which made it feel like we had been forgotten and left behind. However, as we rounded the corner of the hall, my theory changed to something more sinister. 2 bodies lay in our path. One was about 10 feet away from us. The other was much farther down the hall. At first glance, I saw no blood or wounds of any kind. However, I was immediately proven wrong, as her face and a massive, nearly perfectly circular hole covered most of her chest. It almost appeared as though all her organs had been sucked from her body, leaving nothing but a gaping hole and an empty chest cavity. Holy shit. Who the hell could have done this? Sable asked. The mouth of the creature flashed to my mind, and I knew it had to have been the cause. I knew that it was precisely what could have done this. I wanted to explain to him the monster that I had seen, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get the words to leave my lips. In response to my silence and probably worried look on my face, Sable simply motioned with his head for us to keep moving. As we traversed the primarily empty halls towards the bridge, we came across an increasing number of crew laying around with similar if not the same wounds. The anxiety I harbored began to skyrocket as I thought about what we might manage to walk into. I had no idea what all the beasts were capable of, let alone where it came from, or even how many of them there were. Furthermore, I had no idea how long the two of us had been unconscious. If it had only been a few hours, then an incredible amount of damage and destruction had occurred in a very short amount of time. Walking through the door to the bridge painted a very horrific scene of the predicament that we found ourselves in. All but 4 of the crewmen were huddled together, dead in the corner of the bridge. The other 4 seemed to have been killed closer to the doorway. Looking out the main window, I pointed and did my best to get Sable's attention. However, I could only manage one word for what I saw. Fuck. The view before us clearly showed that the ship was on a collision course with the moon. We had either fallen out of orbit or were intentionally placed on the path. I looked at Sable as he looked at me. Both had very wide eyes of oh shit looks on our face. Dude, we gotta... I started but quickly was interrupted. John. Sable, is that you? Said a very hoarse but still recognizable voice. Captain, where are you? Sable responded as he moved towards the corner where the bodies were. After moving some of the bodies out of the way, we saw the captain. He lay there bleeding profusely, missing his entire left arm and a good chunk of his shoulder. He gasped as he struggled to keep breathing. The look of shock was all I could muster as we knelt down next to our dying leader. We should have never messed with it, said Captain Dreyer through the pain and labored breathing. Look what we caused. What is it? How did it get on the ship? I asked. I just did as instructed, spattered the captain. We're gonna crash into Europa. How can we change course? Asked Sable. Must crash. Can't let free. I'm sorry. The captain's eyes glazed over as his final words and breath left his body. I couldn't say that I was pleased with the very little information we were given. I also did not possess the ability to bring people back from the dead to get more answers. My mind raced with as many options as I could think of. Sadly, that only left me with 2 thoughts. We could go down with the ship hoping we didn't get eaten before we crashed. The other option was taking one of the escape pods and wishing we could survive until it dropped us off at whatever programmed destination it was set for. While I was thinking, Sable had already made the decision. "We gotta move. Escape pod, now," he said. Without a word, I stood and began following him off the bridge. Throwing caution to the wind, we hurried and recklessly made our way to the escape pod area. Only a handful of pods were gone, meaning there was a good chance the creature or creatures had wiped nearly all of the ship's crew. As we reached the first available pod, the two of us stopped dead in our tracks. A shimmer of light sparkled ahead of us for a second before this apparent interdimensional being phased into our dimension. My heart sank and I could feel myself begin to panic. The door to the pod opened, and the beast quickly phased back out of sight. I ran into the pod and turned around for Sable just in time to see the creature reappear and pounce on him right in front of me. I reached out for him, screaming for my best friend, as tears filled my eyes. With one hand still grasping onto the door hatch, the beast bit down on his leg, pulling him back from the pod. Sable cried out in pain as the creature's teeth sank into his flesh. Choking back the pain as best as he could, Sable said nothing but gave me a look that told me everything in his final moments. "I can save you! Give me your hand!" I yelled through tears, not wanting to admit the inevitable. Instead of taking my hand, Sable simply forced a smile, slammed his other hand on the control panel, and let go of the doorframe. As the door began to shut. Through the last sliver of the open door, I watched as Sable became entirely enveloped by the creature. The blood began to flow from beneath the strange alien. I screamed out in anguish as tears welled rapidly in my eyes. I instantly realized I just watched my best friend from over a decade get slaughtered right before my eyes. I watched him sacrifice himself to let me escape. I'd never be able to tell him thank you, or goodbye, or anything. Never again. The pod ejected the second the door was sealed. I was shot out into open space. The pod automatically adjusted its course and rocketed towards who knows where. I sat for days, drifting through space, unsure where the escape pod was going. But it doesn't matter. Knowing what I now know and seeing what I've seen, I'll never be the same. Nothing will ever be the same. I have no way to communicate with anyone, having no communications array. Nothing but pre-programmed distress signals were sent out in all directions. Some hope someone would find the pod and save me. Space, however, is vast. I've come to terms with knowing that I probably won't get rescued before I die. Beyond my solitary drift into the void of space, my only worried thoughts is not being able to warn anyone of what happened, and I fear it's already too late. If anyone out there ever hears this, I'm sorry. We didn't know.
This is a set of instructions for how to speak with the devil, which, as those of you with any sort of brains at all might note, is a potentially moronic proposition on the face of it, one likely to culminate in any form of thoroughly unpleasant fates. Honestly, it would probably be smarter to publish your credit card number on Facebook or take up a career in crocodile wrestling. But then, that isn't going to stop you, is it? Not if you're sincerely interested, at least. Technically, if you do everything just right, there's a fair chance that you'll walk away scot-free. And that seems to be reason enough for some people to decide that it's a good idea, especially if you're the fate-tempting, thrill-seeking, scare-junkie type. Or the desperate type. Which brings me to a point of clarification that I ought to make. This is not a manual for making any kind of Faustian bargain. You know, the whole sell your soul type of deal. Although if you happen to bring it up in conversation, he certainly wouldn't be one to refuse. Following through with such a foolhardy bargain, however, would necessitate removing some of the protection
which you'll put in place for your conversation. And I don't think I need to spell out for you why that would be a bad idea. If you're really mathematically impaired enough to want to trade something that will last an infinite number of years for something that might last about 90 tops, there are plenty of other rituals out there for you to follow. This one, if you performed correctly, should allow the two of you to talk. This perhaps begs the question of why exactly would you want to speak with the devil in the first place? Maybe some of you just like the idea of making small talk with extremely dangerous occult entities, but for the sake of the human race, I hope most of you aren't quite that stupid. Short answer is, he knows things. Things that some of you may have a deep vested interest in finding out. I mean, he's not omniscient or anything, much as he might like to pretend otherwise. He's not God, but he's definitely got a supernatural advantage over the kind of knowledge any human would be able to obtain. For example, he probably wouldn't be able to predict when the next world war will happen, or tell you the cure for cancer, but he could very well be able to predict the winning numbers for tomorrow's $500 million Powerball drawing, or tell you what deadly, undiagnosed condition might be afflicting one of your loved ones. Of course, the Prince of Darkness doesn't go around giving out winning lottery numbers to anybody who asks, and trusting any sort of information obtained from being commonly described as the father of all lies is liable to land you in a worse situation than you were when you started. However, if you're really dead set on finding something out, then you've exhausted all other options. There is a way to try to get accurate information out of the guy. You see, like so many of the most urbane villains in popular culture, the devil has a bit of a penchant for games, gambling. Of course, the reason that he likes them so much is that he almost always wins. Unless you happen to be a fiddler named Johnny, or being represented by Daniel Webster. You're probably going to get your ass handed to you. But if you're determined enough to want to face the risks and the long odds, there's a certain game the two of you could play to try to win the information you need. First things first, though. We'll start off with a description of the summoning process, then get into the rules of the game, some tips on how to play, and finally, of course, the inevitable litany of arcane shit. It might go horribly, horribly wrong. In other words, in order to contact your conversational partner, you'll need to go to church at midnight. It doesn't matter what kind of church, large or small, old or new, liberal or conservative. Just as long as you're sure that it will be empty. The last thing you want is for some preacher to walk in on you while you're in the middle of this, for the sake of the preacher's well-being as much as your own. The process will probably work best if you try it on a new moon or a full moon or Friday the 13th or Halloween. The actual day is less important than the psychological effect that it has on you. As long as you don't try it on Christmas Eve or something stupid like that. You should be fine. The time is important though. You don't have to start or end your ritual exactly 12 a.m. Greenwich Atomic Time or anything, but as a general rule of thumb, you ought to show up a bit before midnight and have everything set up by no later than 10 or 15 after. Show up a lot before midnight if you don't know how you're going to get in. Shockingly enough, most houses of God do tend to lock their doors at night. At least, if no one's there to watch over them. And remember, we want empty. Got it? There are, of course, certain things that you need to bring, and certain things that you can't bring. For this ritual, you will need a full can of salt. You won't need to use all of it, but it's always better to have more than you need than have less. 7 candles, red or white being preferable. Something to light the candles with. You'd be shocked how often people forget this, occult ritual or not. They aren't going to magically light themselves. A length of red string, rope, yarn, or thread. A full-length floor or wall mirror. Ideally, you'll want to find one of those already present in the church. They're a bit unwieldy to be lugging around with you during a break-in. However, if there really aren't any there, you'll have to bring your own. You might also find it useful to bring some markers, pencils, paper, a flashlight, any sort of tools that might be necessary to secure your entrance into the church. You will not be permitted to bring in any electronic or timekeeping device. This includes all cell phones, smartphones, tablets, e-readers, MP3 players, PDAs, calculators, wristwatches, pocket watches, kitchen timers, hourglasses, etc., etc., etc. Seriously, it's worse than the SATs. If you're one of those people that has your smartphone practically wired into your brain, don't worry. You can bring those things with you to the church as long as you leave them outside the room in which you'll be doing the ritual. If you brought a flashlight, helpful for finding your way around without attracting unwanted attention, leave that outside too. Also, don't bring any sort of religious paraphernalia to protect you, especially if it pertains to the Abrahamic religions. And yes, if those gothy black cross earrings that you're wearing are hanging right side up, they count. If you have any kind of holy symbol like that with you, the devil will simply refuse to show up. Don't worry, you're not going in totally unprotected. In fact, most of the supplies with you are not for any sort of devil summoning ritual, but for your own protection. Old superstitions and folk magic remedies to guard yourself from evil. From what I know of it, the effects mostly based on the power of belief, so there are probably numerous other objects, artifacts, and procedures that would work just as well. If you'd like to risk being left helpless at the mercy of the devil in order to test that theory, feel free to experiment. However, for anyone without a psychotic death wish, I'd recommend sticking to the ritual as follows. Once you're sure that you have all the right supplies with you, make your way into the church and find some place to set up. It can be anywhere from the main sanctuary, where services are held, to a Sunday school classroom, to a walk-in supply closet. As long as you have a sufficient amount of open floor space, and you're certain not to be disturbed, set up your mirror first. This is where the devil will appear when you summon him. As such, you mustn't complete the summoning until you've laid down certain wards around it. First, surround the mirror with an unbroken circle of salt. If the mirror is hanging on a wall or floor, lay down a semicircle around it instead. Make sure that the salt touches the wall at both ends. Then wrap your red string around the mirror several times. The color red, specifically red string, is symbolic of protection in the folklore of many cultures and religions. This is also why red candles are a good idea. And speaking of the candles, set them up around the outside of your circle or semicircle of salt, spacing at relatively even intervals. No, you don't have to get out a measuring tape and make it perfect, but do at least try to make it look as though it was set up by someone old enough to be trusted with matches. Light the candles in a clockwise fashion, being careful not to disturb the salt. If you break the circle, you'll have to start all over again. Once all the candles are lit and burning strongly, your protective wards are complete. You are now ready to proceed to the actual summoning. To do so, you must first get the devil's attention and demonstrate your resolve by performing some sort of sacrilegious act in the holy space. Turning a crucifix or cross upside down is fairly conventional, but it's not the only option. For example, I know of a kid who once fulfilled this requirement by scribbling down obnoxious graffiti all over a painting of Jesus hanging in his Sunday school classroom. The nice thing about turning a cross upside down is that once you've finished your encounter, assuming that you've survived it in one piece, you can just flip it right side up, and no one's the wiser, sidestepping the relatively minor but still irritating risk of having your Sunday school turn into a reenactment of the Spanish Inquisition for the next month and a half, after you've finished doing whatever offensive thing you've decided on. Shut all doors into the room. Turn off all the lights so that the space is lit by the candles. Face the mirror and stare deeply into it, concentrating on your desired outcome. There are no incantations, no arcane strings of Latin that you have to recite. Just look into the mirror and wish as hard as you can for the devil to appear there. After a few moments of this, when you feel ready, close your eyes and count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then open them. If all has gone correctly, you will no longer see your own reflection. You'll be looking at the devil. Or at least, looking at the way the devil has chosen to appear to you. Chances are he won't look like your conventional red-horned demon with goat legs and a pitchfork, nor any sort of terrible apparition. No point in scaring you off now. Better lure you in, make you feel safe. To that end, he generally takes on an appearance of a fairly average, nondescript human being. If anything, he's prone to vanity, or lean towards the more attractive end of the spectrum. The only really frightening part of him will be his eyes. No matter how hard he tries, he can't hide the sinister gleam smoldering deep within them, the malevolent amusement and hunger, like the eyes of a spider contemplating a fly struggling in its web. They're supremely confident, those eyes. Confident without pity. Don't look into them too deeply or you'll begin to feel helpless, paralyzed with dread, losing your hope and your will to fight. Since you'll probably just be standing there staring at him in shock for a few moments, having on some level expected for the ritual to fail, he'll initiate the conversation by asking you what it is you desire from him. If you can gather your wits enough to string together a coherent sentence, you should respond with something like this. I wish to challenge you in a game of question and response. I mean, even if you don't get the words exactly right, he'll know what you mean, and he'll accept your request with a wide, predatory grin of anticipation. He's been playing this game for a long time, you see, and he's very good at it. Most humans, on the other hand, are very bad at it. This gives him a chance to, at the very least, thoroughly mess with your mind, and at most, well, we'll save that for the litany of shit that can go wrong. You'll have to play it very smart to avoid justifying his expectations. The general rules to this game are very simple, with a few that can make things more complicated. He'll begin by asking you a question. He always initiates the game. It can be anything from a piece of obscure trivia to a riddle, to an extremely personal inquiry. Don't worry. You won't be immediately plunged into hell if you get the answer wrong or anything like that. As a matter of fact, he won't even tell you whether you got it right or wrong. After you've answered the question, you get to ask him one in return. Now, here's where the consequences of your response come in. If you answered his last question correctly, he will respond to your question honestly and accurately. Well, as accurately as he is able. However, if you answered it incorrectly, he's free to lie to you as he sees fit. Perhaps, if you've asked him something you're better off not knowing, he'll tell you the truth about it anyway. More likely, he'll feed you the most insidious, damaging lie that he can come up with. Either way, after he's responded, he'll ask you another question, and the process will repeat over and over and over and over and over and over until you decide to call it quits. Now, you may be sitting there thinking that it sounds fairly easy to get the information that you need. All you have to do is wait for a question that you can answer correctly, and then take that opportunity to ask him what you really want to know, ignoring everything else that he said. Well, it's not that simple. The devil will never give you an easy question, one that you can be completely sure of the answer to. He may instead give you a question that you have some vague knowledge of, that you think maybe you know the answer to but aren't really confident, thus forcing you to endlessly second-guess yourself, obsessing over whether or not you can trust the information that he gave you next. Perhaps you'll think that what he said was a lie, wish it was a lie, but be eternally consumed by doubt, unable to fully convince yourself that you are wrong. Or perhaps You'll have to make a huge choice based on the information that he gave you, and be tormented by fear and indecision as you realize that your fate, and perhaps that of others as well, rests entirely upon whether or not you were able to correctly recall some arcane piece of trivia that you don't even remember now. You'll never remember the exact question that the devil asked you, by the way. That would make it too easy for you to go back and check your response. Or maybe, instead of testing your knowledge, he'll ask you something personal, something you even lie to yourself about. You answer back to him, thinking that you've got the question correct. No, I don't resent my sister. Yeah, I would turn the money into the police. But he'll know better. He'll know better than you do yourself. He'll know better than you do that you're lying. And he'll lie to you in return. And you'll believe him. You'll believe him until you're no longer able to deceive yourself, and by then, it might be too late. Or maybe he won't even give you a chance to get an accurate response at all. Maybe he'll just ask you endless strings of complicated, impossible questions, making you more and more frustrated and disheartened as you realize that you'll never be able to force him to tell you the truth. Questions like, what is the exact height of Mount Everest in centimeters in the year 1666? Or what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? Although knowing his sense of humor, if he ever asked the latter, he might consider African or European a correct response. There are a couple of ways to short-circuit this particular strategy. However, additional rules and courses of action that make the game more interesting and prevent you from being stonewalled completely, although in all honesty, he probably wants for you to try one of those options anyway. The first option is to ask him a riddle instead of a question. If you somehow manage to stump him and he answers the riddle wrong or gives up, he'll be obligated to give you a truthful response to your next question. If he answers the riddle correctly, once again, don't worry. He won't pounce you like a sphinx or drag you into hell. What will happen is that he will get a pass, allowing him to lie in response to one question he would otherwise be obligated to answer truthfully. Honestly, if he gets a pass, you might as well just give up and quit the game right there. It's nearly impossible to determine when he's telling you the truth under the best of circumstances, adding another layer of complexity by constantly trying to figure out when and if he's using his pass. It's about enough to make any normal person's brain explode. There's no way, just forget it. The second option is for you to take a dare from him, if you accept it, and vow to follow through. Then once again, he'll have to answer your next question truthfully. If you choose instead to reject it, he'll get another pass. Now, before you freak out and reject the whole idea completely, you should know that he won't ask you to do anything overly dramatic or unspeakably evil like blow up a hospital or murder somebody. As a rule of thumb, most dares won't involve direct loss of life or any major felonies. However, these certainly won't be easy. Inflicting severe pain on yourself, doing something that terrifies the shit out of you, cutting off a treasured relationship, publicly humiliating yourself, or someone that you love. All of these things and more, things you might not be able to imagine, are completely on the table. If you're willing to go that far, to put yourself in that kind of position, you'll get your answer. However, if he manages to come up with the one thing you know you simply can't or won't do, well then, once again, you might as well just quit. One last thing. Don't think that you can just tell him that you're going to do something and then not do it. If you accept a dare and then you don't follow through on it, well, let's just say there are consequences. Just suck it up. Keep your promises. No matter what it was. Trust me, you're better off that way. And finally, when you either gotten the information that you want or you've given up on it completely, you may end the ritual by simply thanking the devil for accepting your request, bowing politely at the waist, and bidding him farewell. The surface of the mirror will seem to swim and flicker for a moment, and then you'll be looking at your own reflection again. Only when you're absolutely certain that you're looking at your own two eyes again You turn away from the mirror, flick the lights back on, and begin dismantling your protections. Now, and this is important, even if you haven't gotten the information that you wanted, you must end the ritual in this manner before 66 minutes have elapsed. Well, I suppose that technically you have 66 minutes and 6 seconds. I'm subtle, right? But if you're seriously going to try to cut it that close without any kind of timekeeping device, you're probably screwed anyway. I can't emphasize enough how important it is that you keep to this time limit. I'll save the reason behind that for the end, but don't skip ahead. I still have a few important tips on how to play. 1. Be very careful what sort of personal information you give out. Try not to talk about yourself, especially your emotions and problems, any more than absolutely necessary. This guy knows human psychology like the back of his hand, and he will try to get inside of your head. It's like talking to Hannibal Lecter. Give him enough to work with, and even if you don't believe a single word he says, he'll still find a way to fuck with you. Fuck with your mind like nobody's business. If anything he asks makes you remotely uncomfortable, do not hesitate to lie through your teeth. There will be plenty of other questions. On a similar note, try to keep the game on track and moving briskly. Unstructured interactions of any kind are to be avoided. Chances are, at some point, he'll try to draw you off on a tangent, discussing something that fascinates you, analyzing a response that you've given him, or finding some other excuses to speak at length without moving the game forward. This is not only a waste of valuable time, but also another excellent opportunity to mess with your mind. 3. If you choose to give him a riddle, use one that you've made up yourself. If your riddle has ever been written down anywhere at all, from the pages of The Hobbit to some long-lost tome of ancient magic, you'll already know the answer. That said, it still has to be a legitimate riddle, with an answer that makes logical sense of some angle. You can't just ask him something like, what's green and has 10 legs and hops, then claim for some inexplicable reason that the answer was marshmallows. Nor can you ask him a straight question like, what have I got in my pocket? Plus, he probably knows that anyway. There are no hard and fast rules to determine whether a riddle makes sense or not, but you're a reasonable human being. Your ancestors ate from the tree of knowledge. Please, for the love of crap, use some common sense. 4. If you choose to take a dare, there is a slight chance that the devil will ask you to do something seemingly easy. Deliver a letter, for instance, or scribble a 10-digit number in the public restroom stall. If he does ask you for something like this, and you have even a shred of common decency and you do not accept, chances are that he's using you to further some sinister plot, one liable to ruin a lot of lives and harm a lot of people. Who knows, maybe you're the type of person who really doesn't mind throwing an unknown number of total strangers under the bus to find out what you want to know, but at least be aware that that is what you're doing. 5. Last but not least, be very aware of the time. It might be helpful to do some practicing beforehand and get a feel for how long an hour is without a watch. The devil will probably put off discussing the things that you've been most keen to find out for as long as he can. And as you're near the 66-minute deadline, he'll start to try harder and harder to distract you, captivate you, and otherwise keep you playing until it's too late. He'll string you along, feed you little glimmers of false hope, keep you thinking, just a few more minutes, I'm almost there. Don't fall for it. Don't go over the time limit no matter what. Now you might be thinking that the game really doesn't sound all that dangerous so far. Threats of psychological damage rarely seem to carry the same weight as threats of physical damage, even though their costs are often just as great. Hate to burst your bubble, but the game is far from safe. There are plenty of ways for you to seriously screw yourself over, both physically and mentally, not to mention spiritually. And it is with these that I will conclude in the vain hope that they may make some sort of impression. First, while you're speaking with the devil, do not let him out of your sight. keep staring into the mirror no matter what happens. He will undoubtedly try various tricks to make you look away. You hear noises behind you, feel eyes on the back of your neck, see shadowy phantoms writhing in the depths of the mirror. A cold breath will blow upon you from behind, smelling like the crypt. A deep silence will settle, only to be interrupted by a loud smack directly above your head, giving you about the worst jump scare that you've ever heard. Hell, the devil may even abandon a measure of his own dignified facade and give a sudden jump of feigned shock. Suddenly, shouting loudly and pointing behind you with a very convincing look of terror on his face. Whatever he might test you with, you must not look away from him. If you look away, if you lose sight of him completely, even for a second, you will look back at the mirror to find him gone. Well, not gone. Out of the mirror, in the room, with you. Exactly how much of your body the police will find the next morning, and in what state it's in, will depend entirely on the sort of mood that he's in. The same thing goes if you break any of the protections that you laid down beginning the ritual. Interrupting the circle of salt, letting the red string unwind, knocking over a candle, or letting one go out, any of these things will free him from the mirror, and then, well, you're a bunch of creative horror junkies. I'm sure you can fill in the blanks. On a different topic, you may reach a point in the game, probably after a long series of maddening, impossible questions, where the devil asks you the deceptively simple question, "What is your full name?" You must not give it to him. Names can be the things of great power. Although the devil will, of course, already know your name, telling it to him yourself is akin to inviting a vampire into your home. Your name is deeply synonymous with your own inner self. Thus, giving him your full name is powerfully symbolic of giving him yourself. If you're foolish enough to make this mistake, all of your protections will be for naught, and he will seize upon your unwitting offer with malice glee, stealing away your soul, dragging it back with him into hell. At least this way, the police will find a complete identifiable body. As a matter of fact, your vacant shell will be totally unblemished, seemingly having dropped dead of sheer terror. Last but certainly not least, there's a matter of what happens if you go over the time limit. This is arguably the worst thing that you could do. You won't think so at first. The devil will give you no indication that you have in fact exceeded the time limit. You'll conclude the ritual as if nothing had gone wrong, perhaps as the devil's image in the mirror trembles and gives way. You'll see a particularly nasty, triumphant smirk flash across his face. But this will be easily dismissed as your imagination. You'll turn the lights back on, gather your belongings, and go to leave the room, but when you open the door, you will see nothing. That's right, nothing. Just a flat, white void extending indefinitely in all directions. Only the room which was reflected in the mirror will now exist. Incidentally, if you turn back around to face the mirror again, you may catch a glimpse of your own reflection. Perhaps it will even turn and favor you with a smirk and a cheeky wave before sweeping out the door into a perfectly normal church hallway outside. As you may have already figured out, you yourself are no longer in the church. Your soul is now trapped in the mirror, and the devil has taken the liberty of possessing your body, now that you are no longer using it. Pound on the glass and scream all you like, you'll never get out on your own, and no exorcist can help you. But don't worry, it's not like you're in hell, right? At least not necessarily. What you have to understand, see, is that a human soul, stripped bare of its flesh, is a deeply volatile and vulnerable thing, especially when trapped in the lands of the living. You are now an entity of purely mental properties, and as such, the barriers between what is real to you and what is imaginary have been completely dissolved. As you fill that reflected room with your anger, your sorrow, your fear at being trapped, those emotions will begin to coalesce, given form by your mind. If you're not particularly imaginative, these creatures may not be too terrible. may not be able to inflict too much horror and pain. With time, you may even be able to teach yourself to get rid of them. If, however, yours is a mind haunted by monsters, a mind that is vibrantly creative and imaginative and more than usually twisted, well, there's no telling what kind of horrors might come clawing their way out of that maelstrom, tasting sweet release from the confines of your subconscious, hungering for your terror and suffering. They will refuse to be banished, dragging you kicking and screaming into an endless, positive feedback loop of pain and horror. Needless to say, if you're a regular patron of websites like this one, you're probably pretty, well, fucked. There's only one way to find a release from the mirror and the world that you've created therein. They say that if you call to the devil once more and ask him to free you from the mirror, he'll be willing to take you out. For the usual fee, of course. Who knows, maybe your imagination is twisted and powerful enough to create a personal hell that leaves you begging for the real thing. Those talents might be put to good use. There are over 7 billion people in the world, after all. Even the devil himself can't be messed with all their minds at once. Talented help is always appreciated. Of course, the corollary to your being trapped inside the mirror is that the devil now gets to do whatever he wants to your body until sunrise. At around that time, your body will mercifully drop dead from the strain of the possession. Autopsy will properly identify the cause as some kind of coronary event. Don't get too relieved, though. He's perfectly capable of stirring up plenty of trouble in those few hours. For instance, he may decide to do something big and dramatic, like purchase a large meat cleaver and go on a murder spree, starting with the names in your address book, and working his way out to complete strangers if he has time. Or perhaps he'll focus only on one person, someone who trusts you completely, using your persona to get him or her alone and vulnerable, and then, well, no need to describe it here. Once again, I'm sure that you can think of a few things. Starting to see why I call this the worst outcome yet? Of course, there's always a chance that he won't lay a finger on any of your loved ones, instead deciding to do something a bit more subtle, more insidious, like drop off a few nondescript unmarked packages on certain doorsteps in the dangerous part of town, or locate a particular dusty, age-old text in the storeroom of your local library and unintentionally misfile it in the young adults literature section, or whisper 7 very choice words into the ear of the distracted-looking young redhead waiting for the 3 a.m. subway train. Or maybe he'll decide that in this age of waning superstition, not enough people are getting interested in his games, and the knowledge of them is in danger of being lost. Maybe he'll decide that he needs to get the word out a bit more, do a bit of networking, attract some new suckers, challengers. Maybe he'll take a quick peek at your browser history, see where the impressionable, curious minds are hanging out these days. Maybe he'll write a quick tutorial, in modern parlance, rather than some instructable, obsolete, demonical text. Post it on the internet, see how many bytes he gets. Or maybe, I really shouldn't have given that out. I really shouldn't have gone there. But if you've made it this far without shying, a little twist at the end isn't going to put you off, is it? I'm sure there's plenty of intrepid adventurers among you with burning questions that you've liked answered, and you're all a very smart bunch. You know the pitfalls. You know the conventions. You live and breathe this sort of thing. Do you not? There's no way that you'd fall into any of the obvious traps. Right? You're not some Dick or Jane off the street after all. You'd bring a whole new level of competition. You would. Excuse me for just a moment. I think I hear someone calling me. What? Already? Must be one hell of an imagination you've got on you. Perfect.